Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
According to the Bible, the offspring of the Elohim defiled themselves by taking women as wives and mixing their DNA with the DNA of humans, producing giants who are still worshipped as gods to this day. The Father of all living things was angry and cursed the giants with the dragon's curse that would cause them to destroy and devour each other right in front of their immortal parents. They were cursed to roam the earth as spirits and ghosts until the end of time. State.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up. Who was able to make war with him.
Hi, Diane. Good to see ya.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to the Midnight Ride. I am excited to welcome each and every one of you into the Puritan Barn, into the NYSTV studios for the Midnight Ride with myself and John Pounders. I want everyone to be aware that tonight you're not going to hear some tone from a latte sipping echo chamber. You're not going to see a broadcast where guys hold up coffee cups with weirdo goddess sea creature things on them, but you're in for a real truth encounter. And it's time to ride because we are now
Live. What's up, guys? Hopefully, I didn't blow your speakers out with that one. I try to keep it under tow. It's really hard because I get excited and I just want to scream it, but I'm keeping your speakers in mind. So, guys, let us know how you are. Let us know where you're from in the chat. David, how's your week been, man?
It's been very good. Been very good. Things are hopping and a popping, and we're just thankful for all the Lord's doing. We really are.
Very good, guys. And I just want to say this. Last week, I asked you guys to donate to a mission to Lebanon, and I appreciate it because what I asked for was $2,500, and within a couple days, it was way over double that. It was like triple that money. I just want to say thank you to you guys. First off, be in prayer about this trip. It's still taking place, but the GoFundMe has chosen to freeze the money that they would be giving us to go to Lebanon. So if they do that and then they decide not to pay us, they will refund all of you guys back. But I just want to make you guys aware of them doing that. The trip's still going to go, but just be in prayer. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And so with that being said, that's all I got to say about that. I just want you guys, your prayer for safety, and also that we actually make some waves there in Lebanon, and that we reach people with the truth and reach people with life-saving tactics. So I want to say thank you guys to that. And so, guys, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Many mainstream companies put dangerous chemicals in their products that contribute to disease and disability. This is why it's so important that we take care in the products that we consume. The skin is the largest organ in your body, and it is the covering to your temple. Our sponsor tonight is Sugar and Spice Soap Company. They create all natural and biblically clean soaps and beauty products. They even have a soap for Midnight Ride listeners. use coupon code NYSTV to receive 10% off all your purchases. Link in the description. If this is true, then our country is in a lot of trouble.
Okay, it's glaring already, guys.
But he said, my daddy takes the bodies to the grocery store and he grinds them up and puts them in the hamburger. And nobody ever knows it.
How can kids 6, 8, 10 years old be describing rituals that come from a book like the Book of the Dead?
Hey, Phil, good to see you, bro.
It's hard to get your mind around people being capable of this kind of evil.
All right, guys, thank you so much. If you guys liked anything that you saw in that preview, check them out. The links are in the below. Also, for those of you that would like a Midnight Ride cup, we're offering right now 50% off and for these mugs, and also another mug, the Rumbler here that David has. And you can
Love my Rumbler.
That Rumbler right there is actually, if you use their coupon code, which is #TourHit, I believe it's in the description, then you actually get that mug for much cheaper than you would get any mug that you would pay for at the store. It's a really awesome deal. So check that out. It's on Truth or Fit, link in the description. One more thing. Also, next week, the Midnight Ride is going to be a little different because our man David is taking a much-needed vacation from the Midnight Ride. Tell us who we're having on next week, David.
Well, next week, my little buddy and co-host from season 9 of the Doctrine of Christ on our new Doctrine of Christ YouTube channel, Jillian Stone will be doing the Midnight Ride with John, and it's going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Very good. And then after that, the next week, we're going to have another guest. So it's going to be an interesting set of Midnight Rides. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this one is because it kind of combines the last 3 shows that we did into a trilogy. And all 3 shows go together. They're almost like they could be a 3-part series on that. But we're going to discuss that and really kind of put, I guess, some bones behind all of this and tie them together in a special way. What do you guys have going on FOJC, David, this week?
Tomorrow night, our Sunday Night Live, The Cult That Kidnapped Christianity will be on our Sunday Night Live, coming out at 7 p.m. Central Time. So we're looking forward to that.
Very good. So I'm excited to do this. And I just want to say, too, a lot of people in the chat were giving suggestions on different funding sites. I wish I would have known about that. There's a lot of things that I wish I would have known about before I did the GoFundMe. Let's put it that way. I wish I would have known. And I wish I would have understood that certain countries, you just can't raise funds to help. And you just have to be careful with doing that. And a lot of people don't understand the reason for the risk or the mission. But those of you that are guided to do something will understand. And so that's where I want to leave that. But you guys will understand why we're doing what we're doing. So we've reached thousands, if not actually millions, if you want to count how many views we've had overall. It's over 100 million views between our podcasts and between all of the Midnight Ride shows, FOJC. We have reached millions of people in the English world. And so it's really important that we also do the far reaches of the world as well if we can.
Amen.
So,
absolutely.
With that being said, David, let's get it ready to ride. You ready?
Let's ride, sir.
Okay, guys. So the first episode that we did in this.
Hey, Voss, you missed the live bit.
And for those of you that are not familiar with that, David, why don't you help explain a little bit about what that means? Because the term Hyperborea gets thrown out there a lot. There's a lot of different legends that deal with Hyperborea and these giants that are said to reside in this land.
Yeah, Hyperborea is that mysterious land in the far north that is connected with the inner earth, and it's connected with the giants. It's connected with Atlantis. And on that presentation, the basic way that we approached it was in this book, The Nephilim Brood by Mr. Willem McLeod. He connected, and this was something that I'd never seen or considered before, but he connected the giants of Hyperborea with the Tuatha De Danann. And that just deeply fascinated with me. And he brought out so much documentation that he had me hooked very quickly. And the race of giant white giants that we find all over the American Indians, they all are telling the story of this white race of giants that was a ruling people under them. And we also connected it, or well, Mr. McLeod did, and we followed the documentation. He talked about a Celtic fire ritual. And I'm
going to pull that up for you here.
Okay. And let me grab my book here. And he talked about this ritual.
The fire drill?
Yeah, the fire drill. And well, that was recorded, and I'll read it to you in the Celtic practice. And this is the amazing thing that we saw, that this Celtic practice of the fire drill, we connected with the line of Cain, we connected it with the Tenochtitlan, and the city named after Enoch and the line of Cain. And we're going to take it a step farther. We're going to take it a step farther. We're going to bring it right home on this broadcast. But he says this. He says another important Celtic festival also linked with the navel of the land, and that's very important also. Was considered to be the navel of the heart of the earth. And Usenek in particular was Beltane. According to the tradition, this was when the Druid Midday lit the first druidical fire. From this fire that burned for 7 years, all other fires in Ireland were supposedly lit. Thereafter, the Druids gathered every year to light the fires of Bel on Beltane. Now, we'll connect this to the fire ritual that was practiced in Tenochtitlan. And that is significant because in the Word of God, it talks about evil Enoch. There's a good Enoch and there's a bad Enoch. We love the book of First Enoch. We're doing a commentary on the book of First Enoch on Now NYSTV. But there's also an evil Enoch from the land of Cain. And it talks about, and the Bible says that he built a city and named it after his son Enoch. And right there where Mexico City now stands, there was a city called Tenochtitlan with the name of Enoch right in there. And the Aztecs were even called the Tanochs, the Enochs.
I knew that.
And I'll just read the ceremony, and this is really just deeply fascinating. And it is very compelling that we can see similar rituals practiced among the Celtic people and also among these the Aztec people. And boy, are we going to bring it home. We're going to bring it home. But I'll just read this text here. The fire priests were called Telemanakwe, and the impersonators were called the Tiamanane, or the walkers of God. And isn't it interesting that Enoch walked with God and he was not? And they left Tenochtitlan at nightfall to process to the hilltop temple at Huaxaltan, where a captive of noble birth suffered sacrifice by excision of his heart, and the symbolic new fire was initiated by use of a fire drill, which John's going to show you in just a minute, placed on or in the point of excision. This new fire was then conveyed to the temple of Huaxapultai at Tenochtitlan, which was the signal for all other fires to be struck throughout the empire. And John here is going to show you some fascinating pictures of this fire drill and just what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And you can find these pictures for yourself here on this website here. This is called mexicolore.co.uk/Aztecs, and it talks about the fire drill. And you can see all of these different depictions here. This is one of the new fire ceremonies here. And interestingly, David, you were talking about Enoch building the cities, there's been a lot of recent episodes of different people saying that Enoch built the pyramids, and that's the legend. And of course, we know, because we've been really studying this, that there definitely were two Enochs. There's a good Enoch, and then there's an evil Enoch as well, which causes much confusion, I feel like.
It really does. And a lot of people, what they'll do, they'll say Enoch, and they'll read, and they're intentionally deceptive, and they'll read out a second and third Enoch, which are deeply occultic, and they'll try to make people think they have an authoritative document, and they'll mix the three Enochs together. And there's a lot of people that are really misleading a lot of people out there doing that.
Yeah, no doubt. This one here shows the actual going into the heart as they're doing that, like you read in that book, how they would make the fire right there on top of their sacrifice. And one of the things that we talk about in the Hyperborean idea is just the fact that these giants traveled very, very far, and giants, or whatever you want to call them, they traveled far and wide to make sure to teach this doctrine amongst all of the uncivilized tribes in the world, and also amongst, really, there was a worldwide government at one time.
There absolutely was.
There absolutely was. This is an interesting depiction here of Tenochtitlan as well. You see the fire serpent, the phoenix with the serpent in its mouth. You see just so much of this same kind of artwork. When you see this feathered serpent, I don't know if this is actually the picture of the feathered serpent.
Why is it glowing so quick?
A phoenix with a snake in its mouth, but it's interesting. When you look at these places in South America, one of the things that I find the most just alarming is how many there are. They're even finding Chinese pyramids as well that are covered with brush. But I looked at an aerial photo. There's somebody that I know from Peru, and they tell me that there are places that nobody's ever talked about, nor have people explored. And one of the spots that you can look at on Google Maps, which I wish I had it up here for you, but you can see from the top, you can see that this is clearly a pyramid, but it literally has nothing but tree and debris over the top of it. But there's places all over the world that have yet been discovered. And I think there's places here in Indiana, places in Kentucky that are actual pyramids that are underneath these things. And so this goes to show you how far the reaches of these builders were.
And there's some common elements here. There's the tree, the serpent, and the bird. And in this symbology, John's talked about this a lot in the Nephilim Messiah, about the going to the top of the tree, and sometimes it's a serpent, sometimes it's a bird. And these birds kind of run together. There's the Anzu bird of the Sumerians. There's the thunderbird, which was well known in North American Indians. There's the
back, Mike.
Feathered serpent. There's the Bennu bird, which was associated with the capstone in Egypt of the pyramid. And something Mr. Cloud said, this was in book 2, page 414. It says, in fact, the great Seth clearly goes back to the thunderbird or Anzu spirit of Sumerian tradition, that the Anzu that to various degrees became incarnated in messianic figures. And he goes on to mention Lugalbanda, Gilgamesh, and Narmesen. So, and this is gonna pop here in just a minute, because they believed that these avatars, these Christ figures that had this bird spirit come upon them, there were a line of these that were the incarnations that were birthed from this fire ritual. And we're going to really see this come home in just a little bit. It's really going to be stunning.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. This Anzu bird, as you describe it, is so interesting how it's depicted across all civilizations. Of course, in the Indian, what we call Indian, also Native American and Indian culture, you see this, and this is one of the first religions, other than the religion that Enoch and Adam and all of that lineage would have shared. This is one of the first religions, and it goes to shamanism. This way, you see the shamans dressed in the way that they're doing, a lot of times with feathers, etc. And they're said to take these people on this spiritual journey. And one of the first stories of this, which we've discussed a couple times, but I think it's worth discussing again, is the Epic of Lugalbanda.
Yeah.
And Lugalbanda being the father of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is said to be 1/3 man, 2/3 giant. Interestingly, the 2/3 is 0.666, and the 1/3 is 0.333 if you break it down in decimals. But Lugalbande was called the Dwarf King. He was the Dwarf King, the powerful one. These dwarves actually were able to toss huge rocks, according to this epic. They could kill giants, they could kill dragons and dinosaurs with these massive rocks. They were super fast, super mighty warriors. So when you look at a movie called like The Lord of the Rings, you see these dwarf kings and these dwarf warriors that are mighty warriors. In fact, in The Lord of the Rings, without these dwarfs, they would have not won these battles. But he takes this spiritual journey. He gets left behind by his friends when they're out here going on this journey, and because he comes down sick, and he ends up taking this plant and this drink and taking the spiritual journey of this cosmic tree. And if you can picture this, the cosmic tree is, and almost all depictions looks very similar. We noticed this when we were at the mounds that we just recently visited over near St. Louis, but we saw that this depiction was all very similar in almost all cultures, and it's a depiction of this tree having its roots within the ground of the earth, which is symbolic. And at the roots of this tree, you have serpents at the roots of this tree, and up through this tree grows all the way to the heavens, up in the firmament. And in this tree, in the firmament, at the top of this tree, Lugalbande, as he makes his journey, finds this baby Anzu bird, this baby thunderbird or phoenix, whatever you want to describe it as. There's different depictions that look similar, but there's also the depictions you have of the lion head and the body, and then you have the depiction.
Diane, I don't even know where that is. Do you know where that is, Mahali?
That look similar to like a lizard type bird. And at the top of this, he sees this baby Anzu bird, and instead of killing it, he actually creates this temple at the top of this tree for this Anzu bird, this baby Anzu bird. He just takes care of it, feeds it, makes sure it's nurtured. And when the parents of this Anzu bird return, they grant him this ability that he gets when he's down on earth. And his only thing that he had to do was build temples and make sure that this bird, this female bird, was worshipped amongst all of the people. And you see that depiction in Babylon. You see that, that's a common thing, the female goddess, and the goddess winning the favor of the goddess so that you can reign as king. This goes on almost every civilization that follows this worldwide religion. But Lugalbande is an interesting epic, and I think it tells a true story of somebody that existed in some point in time where actually found this knowledge and found this entity that is really interesting to describe. Biblically, it can link to all sorts of things. I mean, you have this entity that's supposed to be kind of the guardian of the top of this cosmic tree that goes south. He ends up defying the God of all to help this man become more than just a man. I mean, what he asked for was if he could look at a place, he could be there, and that fast. So he'd never tire out. So it's pretty interesting.
And there's actually a very solid scriptural foundation for such a thing to be true. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 27 and verse 11, it says, "The men of Arvad with thine army were about thy walls round about, and the Gammadims were in thy towers.
Hey, Susan, good to see you.
Upon thy walls round about, they have made thy beauty perfect." And the Gammadims, it's very interesting in the Bishop's Bible, which was a pre-KJV translated from a proper text. They translated that word, this is obviously in an Old Testament from the Masoretic, but they translated it pygmy, because the root of this word Gammadim means unit. We're talking about means cubit, So we'd be talking about a little fella 3-4 feet high. And this, the story of Lugalbande and of dwarf warriors, there's definitely here, we have a scriptural foundation for such a thing to be true. And that they were allied with Tyre, which was deeply imbued in paganism and the Nephilim religion.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to actually see Tyre. I know there's a lot going on over there, violence-wise,
boy,
but
yeah.
it's gonna be really cool.
That is just, I'm so thankful. I'm so glad you're gonna be able to go. That's just off the hook.
Well, you're gonna go with me one day, David.
I might have to do it.
We're gonna give these folks a tour of Belbeck, Byblos, and Tyre, and wherever else we decide to give tours of one day.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully, y'all willing, I guess is what we could say with that.
That's right.
But yeah, you know, when you talk about these dwarves, and you have, you know, a lot of cryptid graves being found that really tie in the idea that these things really existed. This was amongst a lot of legends, but like, you know, I think it's in Tennessee, you have the fairy graves that they have there.
Sure do, yeah.
You have legends, old American native legends that really, this is actually is where we get the idea of a stork carrying a baby to deliver.
Yeah.
But there was the legends of the war against the pygmies and the storks. And what happened was these storks would come and gather these pygmies, grab these pygmies to eat them and take them off to their young, and they would have to fight these off. And eventually a lot of the pygmies got eradicated because of these storks. But people would see these storks flying with this baby in tow, and this is where that story came from. It's pretty amazing. You know, all of these little nursery rhymes have a meaning somewhere.
Yeah, and this is just the continuation of the Thunderbird and the dwarf. And there's a really interesting article of a baby that was snatched by a Thunderbird in Illinois. It was in the 1800s. Very well documented in front of a lot of witnesses, and just came down and took the baby away.
It reminds me of the Mothman mystery too that they have, because a lot of the depictions of these Mothmen from the front, it was like, and if you've been to the beach, you've seen pelicans, and when they stand there and they look down, their thing looks down, but they look like human almost. They look like, they look interesting. But can you imagine pterodactyls, which have been documented to exist in America at one time? There's actually a photo that's supposedly not doctored. Everything that I've read on it, just a real photo, where these old homesteaders have this huge what I would maybe called a thunderbird, but this giant bird that the wingspan's probably 20 feet that they're holding up. That is, it looks like a pterodactyl. We would call a pterodactyl. And if these birds, not just giant birds, this would make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and even to this day in New Guinea, there are many, many reports of pterodactyls still being there in New Guinea.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Hyperboreans, David, something that we haven't really discussed about these, they were said to reside in a certain area of the world, these Hyperboreans. And tell us a little bit about that, because a lot of this is a mystery to the people listening.
Yeah, they were in the far north, and they were also connected with the heart of the earth. And this gives us an understanding of how things have changed on the earth. We can think about Pangea. The Bible tells us in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. And I believe very strongly that there are massive underground tunnels that connect many of these sites. Even in our area down here in Kentucky, the people at Mammoth Cave, they admit that it goes on for over 500 miles, and I bet much longer than that. A good while back on one of our older broadcasts, we had Timothy Alberino on here, and he was talking about how these megalithic sites in South America and these churches there, and they even showed even some footage of this in one of their videos, that there are huge tunnels connecting these sites. And I believe that these things are there, that they are connected with the heart of the earth, and they keep them guarded in secret because they're literally entities living in there. And this is connected very strongly with the lineage of Cain. And this is the ancient, the story of Hyperborea. And this is where it all begins to make sense. And when we can trace the Hyperboreans and the lineage of the giants as they came down, they came into the area now in the Caucasus Mountains where...
Shawnee, you can bet your bottom dollar there's US troops in the Ukraine, and Russia would know it, but it's not announcing it because that's a red line cross. So I reckon Russia's keeping that quiet. You can bet your bottom dollar they'd be in there teaching them about the weapons they give them and things like that.
Is right in the heart of Ukraine, the Caucasus Mountains, where the Caucasians originated.
Yeah.
And these giants from the line of Gomer, the Gomerian giants that came down into the area of Asia Minor, and they became the Gallic people that we read of in scripture. And as they went over to Great Britain, they became known as the Celtic people and the Druidic people. And oftentimes, the most plain understanding of scripture is the best. And the Bible tells us that Cain was banished from the face of the earth. And the face just means surface. And it says that he would be a stranger and a vagabond in the earth. So a lot of times, and I will say at all times, just the most straightforward understanding of scripture is the best. And this line, this lineage of the Hyperboreans. So when Mr. McLeod,
Trump or Biden, either one, you're jumping out the fry pan into the fire. That's what I think.
Connects the Hyperboreans with the Tuatha De Danann. These are these entities that showed up in Ireland and they're in the British Isles. And they came in and they quickly became the top of the food chain of all the Nephilim entities. And there were a lot of stuff going on there in Ireland back in those days. So from this connection, we can see a continuity to see how that this Nephilim race and Nephilim religion spread right here from Hyperborea, when we understand that these Hyperboreans, yes, they're just really the Tuatha De Danann.
Yeah, there's the reason I got this slide pulled up because Apollo, who is another variation of Apollyon, another variation of Bel, another variation of a entity, not quite fully God, but not quite fully man, who has rebelled. And Apollo, there's a legend of Apollo going from Hyperborea to Delphi.
Yeah.
And now David explained the relevance of Delphi to mythology and to the religion of these Nephilim.
Wow, that link, Diane, they want to get into your brain to trigger drugs. And yeah, I wonder what drugs they want to trigger. Do they come in the GAB?
Lean.
The Oracle at Delphi was one of the most famous occult temples where this oracle or this prophet,
it was about a week ago, Diane,
would come out and they would prophesy. And this was such a big deal that the world leaders and the military leaders, they would come to get a word from this oracle at Delphi. It was huge stuff. And this was right in the area where the Apostle Paul ministered, and you can see on a map by the city of Apollonia. And this literally directly ties in to the worship of Apollo. And Mr. McLeod goes into detail proving that these Hyperboreans worshipped Apollo. And we connected the dots and showed, well, like we could read in Revelation chapter 9 and verse 11. And the text here, we know what the beast of the bottomless pit is going to be. Revelation 9 and 11. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. But in the Greek tongue, hath his name Apollyon. And this is a clear connection with the evolving, if you will, for lack of a better term, and the progression of this Nephilim religion until it will finally place the beast of Revelation 13 at the peak of this new world order.
Agreed. You know, and one of these things that stand out to me, you talked a little bit about these Tuatha De Danann, and I've read almost every legend that I could find on these people, and they were said to be shining ones. They were said to be people who had more wisdom, longer lifespans. And at one time, at some point or another, they decided to retreat off once again to Hyperborea. And when you look at these shining ones, you also see that this connects to the Rephaim. The Rephaim were also the shining ones. This was their what they were described as, and they had several levels of shining ones. They had the llamas, who were said to be fully gods of some sort, and then you have the other two kinds that, and I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but if you read in the Ugaritic text, you'll see exactly what we're talking about here. But these tie in so wonderfully with the Bible, especially when you realize that the verse that we describe as Lucifer as being the devil is actually not
Hey,
about
Darren, good to see
the
you,
devil
mate.
himself, but about the son of some being called Shahar. And the word, if you look at the Hebrew in that word in Isaiah, it's Hallel bin Shahar. Bin means son of. Shahar. Hallel means shining one or howler. This is the word there. So you have this shining one who the Bible describes as somebody who thinking he's God. He wants to put himself above, but he's going to die like a man. David, what do you think about that? Is this describing possibly this Baal entity or this Hercules entity or this Marduk entity, depending on what language you'd like to go with?
Yes, absolutely. And there is something here you really hit on, and you can see this in the concept of the Shining Ones and in the legend of the Tuatha De Danann, the stories of how they came in. It's like they just kind of come in on the air, and like these beings, they just kind of rode in and floated in and just took over. And it's interesting in Isaiah 14:21, and this is the text concerning Lucifer. It says in the 24th verse, prepare slaughter. Well, let me read 20. It says, thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. Talking about the seed of Lucifer. And God, in his restraining power, and the restrainer is Michael and the angels, not the Holy Spirit, as the pre-triggers would tell us, they saw fit to restrain and hold them back. And if they did not, nothing could have been withheld from them. And in verse 21, it says, prepare slaughter for his children, the children of Lucifer, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. And I think that's exactly what we had here with why the Tuatha De Danann, who were immensely intelligent, powerful creatures, they just went north. We won't say went south, but went north. And they had to go back in to come out again at a later date to make another run on things.
You know, I guess one of the things that intrigues me, and obviously is a question that we may not be able to answer, but you seem to have a group of entities in the north, but you also seem to have a group of entities in the Southlands, which would be the borders of our world, Antarctica, the Antarctic ice wall. What are the difference in these entities? Are some of them different kinds of entities, or are they possibly doing operations on both? And that's taken into account the idea of Admiral Byrd and his possible encounter with these entities.
Well, what I believe, and it is like in a biblical cosmological model, that literally there is a passageway connecting the two poles. Okay. And literally some believe that water, the flow of water, actually flows through the heart of the earth and the balancing of the tides. I don't know, but I believe that they are connected there with a passage all the way through. And one of the reasons why, in the South Polar region, it's connected with man-made development from the German military that established bases there during World War II, and not so much the North. And maybe that's because we have a higher concentration.
And Shawnee, we're up to date with everything, political, religious, end-day stuff. We're pretty much up to date with everything.
And in the north of these Hyperborean entities.
And we learn as we chill out and have fun. So that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, that's very possible. I know the account of Admiral Byrd is very interesting, and that would lead me to believe that even if we wanted to go there, there would be probably, I guess, stopping. They would stop that real quick. But interestingly enough, just kind of, I wouldn't say going off subject, but because it's not, but there's legends of this giant sea serpent, Leviathan, that in other religions that supposedly resides in this ancient river that's buried underneath the ice. And there's this theory that this global warming that they've been worried about is because they're worried that this serpent that supposedly holds in the waters is being released, and once that happens, that's when the whole turn of destruction takes place on the earth. And a lot of people have theorized that their goal is to, with the weather modification, the goal is to stop the global warming, is an effort to keep this beast from being released on humanity. And with all of the current swells in the water and the things that are showing up on radar, how likely is that possible?
Well, in the book of Enoch, and we did a midnight ride called Beyond the Ice Wall. And in the book of Enoch, it talks about him going through the portals to the to the heart of the earth, and then going to the place where the firmament actually hit the earth and the land beyond that. And he described creatures. And the connection with what Admiral Byrd saw is inescapable. And quite literally, if this theory holds, and just like the book of Enoch, which we give a lot of credibility to, it could be very possible that in those portals there, in the polar regions, that literally in those waters, there are those frozen entities, and that indeed there, beyond the ice wall, there are extinct animals, dinosaurs, and all kinds of things there. And absolutely, we could bring to the table a gaggle of non-canonical literature that talks about the return of Leviathan and the Behemoth in the last days. And there's a very interesting, though there's a lot of interesting scriptures, but one, it talks about in Job chapter 26, the very compelling scripture. It says in verse 5, dead things are formed from under the waters and the inhabitants thereof, and that somehow underneath the water that these entities were preserved to somehow be brought back. And it also speaks in the book of Job, or excuse me, in the book of, it is a book of Job, excuse me, in chapter 38, I believe, it talks about the deep being frozen. So absolutely, there's a lot of things in the scripture and in the book of Enoch that could very well lead us to believe and that there's very likely some nasty stuff frozen there.
Diane, put that link with that one about they want to look into your brain to turn on drugs, and they're the drugs they're talking about, the nanoparticles. That's what I think.
It reminds me in the book of Giants, which I don't put a lot of authority in, but is a copy that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, of course, fragmented, and there is a Manichaean version of this book of Giants. And in the Manichaean version, which I don't put a ton of weight in at all, it talks about one of these giants that seeks repentance, but obviously he was seeking it for the wrong reasons. But he climbs to the top of this mountain as the flood is overtaking the world, and he is instantly hit with this massive horror with what he sees, and he looks down into the water, and there's this huge sea serpent, and described similar to Leviathan, that's swirling in the waters, man, and just swirling, and it just strikes him with fear. And it really just, can you imagine something? The Bible talks about spears not being able to take it down, how just powerful this entity is. And the water is often described with evil entities. It's really interesting in the Bible. The water is what brings forth dead things, right? The Rephaim, the water brings them forth. This is the same thing that we see described in all of these stories of Hyperboreans. The water brings them forth. They come out of the water as sea serpents, as serpents to the land to teach them.
Darren, with the ice wall, I see the North Pole, I see the South Pole, I don't see East and West Pole. In fact, I'm pretty sure the equator is in one of them places this so-called ice wall would be. I do not buy into the ice wall at all.
Knowledge, and we've theorized before. There's a lot of theories on how the giants survived the flood, but it's very, very clear in the Bible and also other mythologies that they did in fact survive the flood. And there were remnants of them called the Rephaim. Some were as tall as cedar trees. Some of them had 6 fingers and 6 toes. The Bible documents all of these different kinds. Some of them buzzed and were just.
And these guys are flat earthers. I'm not a flat earther. I'm a globus. But they don't make it a salvation issue, so I let it go.
Completely horrifying to look at. Some of them made noises, and some of them, like Og, the king of the Rephaim, the king of the dead ones, the king of the shining ones, actually ruled 60 walled cities according to the Bible. 60 walled cities.
Wow.
And all of those cities can be combined to be known as the Aryan civilization. So that right there tells me that this idea of these big Aryan kings and these big Aryan purveyors of wisdom.
Yeah, exactly, Di.
This civilization. This is what we're looking at post-flood.
Yeah, they're done quite a bit of research into the stories in the London papers in the 1800s about sightings of sea serpents. There's gobs of them.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Most people have heard of the Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick. It's got a classic of literature. But what a lot of people don't know, that there was even a movie made about how he wrote the book. And this whale was not just a normal whale.
Yeah, and it's based on a true story. Moby Dick was a demonic whale. Gee, it was a good book. I read it years ago.
It's a super whale.
Yeah.
Many times bigger than any whale any of them had ever seen. And these were whalers.
Wow.
And it absolutely, the stories of this Moby Dick were so amazing that Herman Melville went to the people that survived this episode to document just what happened, and he collected their stories. And they told this story about this super whale that was intelligent. It would track them and it would follow them, things that they've never seen another whale ever do. And there's just, people don't have an explanation for that other than the fact that there are entities that could very well be slipping out of some of these underwater caverns. We know from the book of Jonah that there are bars of the deep and gates that connect the waters literally with the underworld.
Yeah, and recently I've seen headlines where these fish and whales and dolphins are kind of moving towards the shore as if they're scared of something, beaching themselves.
Yeah.
Hundreds of them just beaching themselves. There's a story I watched where these people were helping these dolphins because they kept beaching themselves over and over and over again. And they ended up swimming off, but they went down the shore maybe 100 miles or so and ended up beaching themselves there. But they were scared. It was like they were scared of something in the water.
Yeah.
And this is down there close to where all of this stuff is happening. And of course, I've seen videos that show aerial footage of something swimming in the water. I can't verify if they're real or not, but that would not surprise me at all.
Yeah. And the stories of underwater UFOs are voluminous. Here in the recent, not too long ago, when they had the congressional hearing, I heard these fighter pilots talk about being able to see underneath the water these large objects that seem to be controlling. And these pilots, this one guy was a pilot, and he believed that what he was seeing buzz his plane was being controlled remotely by this thing that he could see down in the water, kind of like a drone type thing, was his opinion.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I know that we've only explored maybe not even 10% of the ocean floor, because why? Maybe they're scared to. Maybe there's more to it than what we know. But with the things that are coming out recently, with top level officials coming out and saying that they've seen crafts underwater flying at speeds, going at speeds that they can't match, and that they are going into these underground civilizations that have tunnels that map up to other civilizations. This is something to be aware of, because not only have we been saying this for a long time, I think it's very clear biblically that they are still in the earth and they're hiding within the earth. And we talked a little bit about how they're manifesting here on earth anymore.
Geez, he can ride a bike, Vars. He's pretty good on that bike.
And I think there are still giants who live under the earth, but
I absolutely believe it.
But when it comes to kings that we have on this earth and how they're manifesting these spirits, these ancient Nephilim spirits, we talked a little bit about that as well, and how they have their own religion that is almost Yeah, I mean, well, almost it's a parallel to the biblical religion, but actually the polar opposite of it. So you take, for instance, we talked about it a little bit last week, but you take the story of Noah, Noah, according to the Sethian Gnostics. The story of Noah is that Noah was tricked God, I guess, and the angels helped him survive. And then he had these offspring that were evil on this earth, and all it's like a completely backward story.
Yeah.
When Abraham's a desert demon, the God of the Bible is a demiurge, and so on and so on and so
Phil.
forth. The religion is based around a Messiah as well as our religion is based around a Messiah, and theirs is a dark Messiah. But the way that they actually envelop these entities, which I believe that they're truly trying to envelop Apollo or Bel or Osiris, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't matter, Hercules in the Greek, but they are trying to embody this thing, and they do this ritual that we talked about called the Hieros Gamos ritual. Really interesting. There's actually a video that I showed. I didn't actually show it last week, but there's a video that you can find on YouTube that depicts what the books that we've read on this Hieros Gamos ritual actually show. And this shows a deity of some sort mating with a woman. And through this divine orgy, I guess you could call it, through whatever you want to call it, they are gifted with a child who is the embodiment of the Nephilim Messiah. And we talked about how throughout time, the Genesis 6, when it talks about these mighty men, men of old, men of renown, one of the first depictions of this is Gilgamesh being a Messiah figure born. And then you have, you have Bel, which I believe Bel and Hercules and Osiris and all of these legends of these Nephilim kings are the same person, but you have generationally a new Messiah will be born. And there's several times throughout history that they believed it. The Sethian Gnostics believe Seth would be born throughout 3 different times. If you look at the Emerald Tablets, you also have the idea of Thoth, or the idea of Hermes, Thrice, these 3 of him.
Yeah.
Which ties in with the idea of the Sethians, what they believe about Seth, that he is the Messiah. He's going to come back 3 times.
Yeah.
And in these Emerald Tablets, you have this thing called the Halls of Amonti, where this entity, Seth or Hermes, or however you want to describe him as, the same person, depending on what book you read, has these bodies stored up in this Halls of Amonti that you can literally only get in with the right frequency. So they talk about places where they believe these portals are, and they're literal portals, but you can't enter without the Ankh, right? So they had this Ankh that they show that looks like a tuning fork. Without that tuning fork, without that Ankh, they were unable to enter into these Halls of Amonti, but he would recharge his body in this hall and then resurrect, or, certain times use a different body. And there's several occurrences of Hermes supposedly appearing several times in history to make this happen. You see the same thing with, I believe it's a lot of people, I can't remember the name of the guy, the wandering Jew, the one that keeps on coming back. You see a lot of people describing it as that. But these entities, the Bible describes them as being Nephilim and giants.
Susan, sometimes they have a bit of a slow show, but sometimes they're really interesting. And tonight they're hitting the nail on the head.
And it also describes that when they died, they became evil spirits that worked against mankind, that literally are working against mankind. And so, David, do you have anything you want to add into this idea of this Nephilim Messiah because I wanted to kind of just show people a time in history where 2 messiahs of 2 rival bloodlines actually took place. Do you have anything you want to add first?
Well, this Hieros Gamos, it's nothing more than the satanic imitation of the virgin birth, and of course they can't duplicate it, but it is literally the producing of a non or part human entity, which is much what Crowley and Parsons were all about. And we talked about also, and I think Comte Saint Germain.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
That's the guy, and he would claim to be hundreds of years old, and even more than that. And we talked last week about Jude verse 4, where there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation, ungodly man, turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness. And this literally is saying that there were men there at that time who a long time ago had been condemned. So I bet that might be the case. And literally, Mr. McLeod, he said that the Gnostics were, many of them, Nephilim. And we went into a discussion of Simon Magnus, and we could talk about Apollonius of Pamphania. And just a lot, it would just make a lot of sense if this indeed was the case.
But most definitely, and one of the times in history that I think is really, really interesting, and for those of you that actually watched this episode a couple of weeks ago, you'll know what I'm talking about. But Jesus makes an interesting declaration. David talked about this place a little bit earlier, where you can see it's at the base of Mount Hermon. It's called Caesarea Philippi, and he pointed at it when he said it. He said, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And this was known as the gates of hell. Interestingly enough, when Jesus comes on to the world, when he enters into this world, at the same time, there's another Messiah of another lineage that has been born, and this one is called Caesar. The word Caesar, actually the word Caesarean section, comes from Caesar because he was so big at birth that they had to cut his stomach open in order for him to come out of there. And so this is where you get Caesarean section. He was known as a Nephilim Messiah. He was the embodiment of this Hieros Gamos ritual. And if you see what happens from the very get-go, you have a battle for this messiahship going on. You have the murder of many Hebrew children. You have the Magi who were tasked with bringing the Messiah back to meet Herod. And you have this constant battle going on between these two different messiahs. And on this particular time period, you have the showdown right there. And I believe the next showdown coming up, you will have an also dueling messiah going on as well. That's why I think it's so important that we figure out the traits of the true Messiah versus the fake Messiah. The fake Messiah, one of the traits that we found throughout all of them was the worship of a God King. And through this worship of the God King, MLK is what it was described as in the Ugaritic text, but it means Moloch. This Moloch, this God King, people would sacrifice their children to this God King. And there are many holidays that come forth from this particular practice, one being what we call Christmas today, one being what we call Easter, and of course there are the different holidays that happens around the equinox, and all of these line up with the Hieros Gamos ritual. All of these line up with the worship of entities as stars, and we can see that the church has adapted and adopted many of these practices as well to further muddy the waters on the difference between the two, but they couldn't be more different. They're exactly opposite of each other.
Yeah, Shawnee, it looks like he did pass away. I heard from him last time just before Christmas, and then he just dropped off the map. So I'm assuming he did. He did say his daughter or his sister was going to let us know, but it didn't happen. But I'm suspecting he did pass on. He's up there now, I'm guessing.
So they're the
Two different messiahs.
Two different messiahs.
Absolutely. And it's going to be so cool. Right here in Caesarea Philippi, which is in Israel, right to the east of that, we have Lebanon. And
Richard Fawcett was his name.
If my geography is right, we come down from Caesarea Philippi down a valley, just about 30 miles. Right there's Baalbek. So, I mean, you talk about a portal, and right to the north, you've got Mount Hermon with Syria to the north. And this is ground zero. You talk about portal, this is the portal of portals right here. And right down from here is Baalbek, where is the largest megalithic stones anywhere on earth. We've got the workings here of what we would see the first and second Nephilim generation of the Nephilim giants, just absolute monsters that could throw these huge stones around just like toys.
Yeah. And I can't wait. I'm hoping to be close enough to be able to at least see it. I know you can see Mount Hermon in the distance.
Okay, it's glaring, guys. Trying to fix the glare.
I won't be able to actually go to Israel during this time period, because if you've been to Israel, you actually cannot go to Lebanon right now at this time. And so, but I won't get to actually go into Israel,
Okay.
but it's just amazing to me, the history of these areas. But I'll tell you, when it comes to identifying this Messiah, as I said before, it couldn't be more important to understand the difference in the two. And I really hate that the traditional church is muddying the waters on this. It really is one of the reasons, the main reasons I even left the church. There was other reasons, but this was the main.
Yeah, it's hard to believe with most of this stuff that they're even talking about the same guy we are. I don't think they are in many, many cases. Like the biblical Jesus of what we read about the real Jesus just can't be the guy a lot of these guys are talking about. He's the false Messiah Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that, unfortunately, when you look at kind of a lot of the religions today, you see it creeping in within certain types of denominations more than others. But one of the biggest targets, I think, is the people who have come out of the church. So because they automatically know now, or they don't automatically know, but they found out that the church is wrong. They found out that they've adopted pagan principles, and then there's wolves that are waiting for these people to leave, and they take advantage of this, mixing this Gnostic and Christian religion together to even make it worse. And I that's why I said in the last show, a lot of people were upset because I said I have more respect for a open Gnostic than I do for one who is a.
We also lost Pat and Kenny, so they'd be up there now, the three of them, probably setting the table for the wedding feast, because we'll be at the same table for that, I reckon.
The Gnostic.
Well, I do too. Big amen to that. And that's why we need to talk about this. There was a fellow, Brian was telling me the other day that, Billy Carson, one of the big purveyors of the line of thinking,
100%, Ross.
in legitimizing and literally exalting the non-canonical text from the Nag Hammadis over the biblical text, that he was on Joe Rogan. And the hits he got, I mean, I don't know even how many. It had multiple million views, within, a very short period of time. This, why we need to be talking about this. And like I say, there are people out there that are promoting these scenarios and exalting it over the Word of God and literally taking people down into the bowels of hell. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but you're right. I mean, Billy Carson is super popular. I mean, he's been on Joe Rogan, he's been on all the shows, Sean Ryan, and they just,
they're eating it up.
They're eating it up. So, people have itching ears, and sometimes they eat up things they shouldn't eat. That's why, I think it's important that we discuss their religion a little bit further. You did a show last week, David, that was phenomenal, in my opinion. We've talked about this subject before, but this is important to minister to people in this. But when it comes to the Sethian Gnostics and their religion, about how far back it goes, you really uncovered some pretty amazing things in there.
Yeah, and it literally goes all the way back.
Darren, we haven't had a military call up, but they have said they're going to let foreigners join it. Maybe that was your army, I'm not sure. They're going to let foreigners join?
The androgynous god, we see it in the Babylonian exorcism texts,
and
we see it in Kabbalah. We talked about how in the Zohar, it literally talks about the creation of God by this entity called Ein Sof. In the Nag Hammadi text, there's the demiurge Yahweh, who is an evil Satan type creature. Then there is the good God, and literally the evil God is the creator in these Gnostic texts, and everything is just totally turned upside down and just totally convoluted. And these things are being peddled out there like wildfire, and there's some really clever deceivers out there, and people need to understand what's going on, because it's happening right now. And this is literally the religion of the false Messiah, and it's coming at us. It's coming at us full bore, and we need not be ignorant of Satan's devices.
Yeah, and one of the things you tied in that I thought was very interesting, that really shows the true nature of the Sethian Gnostics, is that there is possibly a root in that religion that derives from Sodom and Gomorrah, even before that. But Sodom and Gomorrah is a really good envelopment of that, and I think that might have been one of the reasons Lot actually entered into that area. Can you talk a little bit about that and the tie-in with Sodom and Gomorrah, and why would they have a angelic or Nephilim religion. David, what was going on there?
Yeah, and literally in these Gnostic texts, it talks about the great Sodom and Gomorrah being the pasture land of the great Seth. And it talks about the angel Hormos, who planted his seed there in Sodom. And these were the lines of the other seed that the Gnostics believed were the Sethian people. And it's just plain as day in your face, the Genesis 6 bloodline. And this is what led Mr. McLeod to conclude that many of these leading Gnostics were Nephilim, which would make sense that this is what Jude 4 was actually talking about. And also he brought out in this book that Sodom and Gomorrah was in the very near proximity of Qumran, where there were sects of the Essenes that literally bought into this. And from them, and he identified the Ebionites, who became literally an early Hebrew root movement. They denied the deity of Christ, and they rejected Paul, and they became one of the most prominent and troublesome of the early New Testament cults.
Yeah, when you see the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, you obviously, the term Sodom, we know what that means, and we know what the continuation of it is. But there's a lot of civilizations that are like that. San Francisco, for one, that is very similar to what they were doing there. But there was also a deeper, darker element, and one of the reasons that I believe that when they saw the angelic beings there visiting, they wanted to take them. Yeah, and they wanted to use them for sex and for other reasons, but maybe to genetically alter that lineage in a way. And it's really interesting to me because when you kind of continue on after Sodom and you see Lot, the people he chose for his daughters to marry, and these people were described as like cave dwellers and creepy entities of sorts that continued on after that. And it just makes you wonder, because it never really talks about Lot actually doing anything better or different, right?
Right, they're starting to do that here now. You can only buy 2 cartons of eggs. They're rationing the eggs out now because of the bird flu.
It never really talks about in the Bible. Now, you can assume that he repented. You can assume all these different things. But there's a, by the choice in who his family married, I see maybe a different story coming to light.
Well, we know from the biblical record that he impregnated both of his own daughters.
Yes.
And from these incestuous impregnations came forth the nation of Moab and Ammon, who were, this is the human sacrifice called a Moloch.
Yeah. And there were entities described in those groups too that were almost like Pan-like entities that are described to be dwelling amongst these people.
Absolutely.
And so that would make you wonder, what was Lot carrying around in his genetics that having intercourse with his daughters caused these kind of, creatures and nations to rise up. And it makes you wonder too, right around that area, which is something that Willem McLeod brought up in his book, that right around that area is where you find these groups, right? The Essenes would be right around where Sodom and Gomorrah were. So it wouldn't be a hard stretch to think that the continuation of this didn't go very far. And that there is possible that the Moabites and such like that were some of the groups that held on to these doctrines. And I don't necessarily 100% believe that the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls were the Essenes. I know there's a lot of literature and ideas about that. But it's interesting to note that the Essenes, as like the Essene Gospel of Peace and stuff, were in fact Gnostic.
Yeah. And the thing about Qumran, well, we know historically it existed for over 200 years, and there were a lot of different groups in there.
Yeah.
We can see some that looked like they really had a heart for God, and they left and went to Damascus and wrote the Damascus document and even reinstituted. They basically said, the Jerusalem temple and the Pharisees were gone, and they tried to reinstate a pure worship of the Torah up in around Damascus. So a lot going on there, some good, some bad, and you can't just all throw it in one basket and color it with the same brush.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And so kind of in conclusion of all of this, when you look at all of this trilogy of shows that we did, which eventually I'll put together in a marathon type episode. But when you look at these in conclusion, you see, especially if you even go back further, we did another trilogy just not too long ago. But if you go back even further and you can see this progression of this Nephilim religion, Nephilim kingship, and this these practices that traditionally span out through all civilizations in different names and different ways. But you see this go from the pre-flood to the Mesopotamian area, the Sumer and and all such. You have this literature there, and then they leave because they're run out of that area, and some of them stay, but they leave, and there's hordes that attack them according to the histories, and a lot of them go into the Mediterranean area, which is where we have Lebanon, Israel, all of these different things. You have these battles that take place amongst Nephilim kings. You have Abraham in the Bible. It talks about during this time period where he goes to get his brother back, and he goes and he battles these Nephilim kings and takes control and gets his brother back. And you see the power of God behind that. But these civilizations spanned all of the Levant completely. Like David said, you see them going into Europe. You see them going through like the Gallic people, the Tuatha De Danann. And then after that, you even see the continuation of them today through the kingships. And they're all of the symbolism that is behind it is there. And we did a show a while back about King Charles possibly being the Antichrist. And the reason that I even think that it's possible is because the lineage of Charles goes back to every Nephilim king that's ever existed. He is the heir apparent of King Count Dracula. And this is true. He presides over this dragon society that is there in Hungary, where we have Attila the Hun, right? This is the dragon society he presides over.
I thought that was a Davos.
No, there's definitely some dragons there.
So I've been selling.
Well, something that I hadn't brought out before that I was actually gonna do once. One of these days I'm gonna do a show about, but it's about this dragon curse that is. You heard the dragon curse, where you have the two different dragon bloodlines, one that is the dragon slayer bloodline and one that is the dragon bloodline. And there's this curse that supposedly is written about in these Nephilim books that caused them to want to devour each other and destroy each other. We see something similar to that in Genesis, where God basically puts the judgment up against these people that they're going to destroy each other in battle. Enoch expands on that, but they are going to go to war and literally devour each other. They were just devouring everything, devouring mankind, and they got so hungry because they were so big that they literally killed each other and ate each other. This is why you see these tribes in the Solomon Islands and areas like that, like New Guinea, that still to this day eat people and develop kuru and all sorts of different things. But in Solomon Islands, I don't know if you've seen this, David, but they are talks that they are sure there's giants there in Solomon Islands. They've been killing people and doing all kinds of interesting things in that area. But in the kingship, you see that represented, that Nephilim kingship bloodline all the way to King Charles. And of course it would continue with his son and such, but there's so many significant things about this bloodline that we have to take into account.
Darren, none of us took it. Most of us here didn't take it either. I haven't had a jab since I was in the army. That was like 40 years ago now.
Oh, and I have no idea what to expect about who the Antichrist is. There's several good candidates, but we know that this lineage has historically produced these messianic children that rule the earth with the rod, and there's no doubt about that. Yeah. So with that being said, David, I think that we're going to wrap this one up.
Can I please say just a little bit about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre?
Oh yes, I totally forgot. Please say something about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
This is a really, really profound, and this is in Jerusalem, and this was established in the 4th century by the wife of Constantine, Helena, believing that this was the place over where Christ was crucified. Now, what's very, very interesting, now we talked about the Celtic fire ritual, and we talked about the ritual in South America where they would use the fire drill. And thanks to Sister Kim, kudos to Sister Kim. She told me about this. I started looking into it. That the day before the Orthodox Easter, this is under the control of Greek Orthodox, that they literally do the same fire ritual, that they light a fire. And there's all kinds of stories and tales go on about this, how there are blue lights associated with it that emit from there. And of course, blue is so significant because it's huge in the understanding of the Egyptian mysteries with Nefertiti, but they call it the holy fire. And just like that ancient Aztec and the Celtic rituals, they take the fire there. Now we can't miss the symbolism in the Aztecs. Human sacrifice, drill into heart, bring out the fire. This is nothing but presenting Christ as a continuation of a false Messiah, where they bring forth, they present him of a human sacrifice of an avatar like Gilgamesh, Lugabanda, and from just like that fire drill in the heart of that Aztec human sacrifice, they say that this fire comes forth every year on the day before Easter. And then this is the picture right here. They take this fire, and this is a picture, they're flying it into Greece, and they fly this fire into other places, Russia and other big centers of the Greek Orthodox religion. And just like the Celtics, just like the rituals in Tenochtitlan, and we also we talked in our broadcast, this was established in the higher grades of the Bavarian Illuminati. And there you go, right there it is.
Yeah, this is this religion goes back to the Persians as well. Their Zoroastrianism,
Yeah.
they would sit and stare at the fire.
Yeah. The Magi definitely were into fire worship of the Magi. And beyond this, there's more in the very place. And if you have not seen our last Sunday night's broadcast, Cities Lost in Time with Brian Reese and myself, the mystery of Adam's skull, Gobekli Tepe. And we trace the cult of the skull from Gobekli Tepe on down, literally to this place right here. And John has a slide here, the Temple of Adam, or excuse me, the Chapel of Adam. And the Chapel of Adam is in this same place, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And in this place, they really believe that they have Adam's skull in this very same place.
My.
And the worship of the skull, as we documented in our Gobekli Tepe Cities Lost in Time, this intricately connects with this whole cult of the false Messiah. And this is not the same guy we're talking about. You know, there's not fire comes out of his heart every day before Easter, but the Holy Spirit is the true fire that he puts within the hearts of those that are born again and love the real Jesus. But the parallels are unmistakable. How and you know, we're just having the Christ of the Bible presented as another one of these avatars. So it is just absolutely amazing. And beyond that, there's another tradition that comes down right from Scripture, how that and ties right in with the giants. How that King David, when he slew Goliath, and the Bible's very clear, he was dead. He killed him. He put the stone in his skull. But after that, he took his sword and cut his head off. Now, here again, why would he do that? Well, perhaps to keep this this reanimation thing from taking place. And then beyond that, the Scripture tells us that David took Goliath's head to Jerusalem. Now, it could very well be that Golgotha, the place of the skull, that they associate this on the dark world with the skull of Adam and also with the skull of Goliath, who might, and you know, I can't even rule out the possibility that when Christ died, that
I'm pretty sure the Knights Templars, they think they had John the Baptist's skull. I'm pretty sure that's right.
his blood actually hit the skull of Adam and Goliath. What truer picture would it be? From Adam, we all get our sin nature because sin was transmitted because of the original sin of Adam. And through Goliath, he represented this Nephilim bloodline. And both of these things, they're things that Christ is totally against, and the death of Christ on the cross has made propitiation for these very, very things. So it is just absolutely amazing. And, we could see here a very, very clear connection, connecting this fire ritual again with the false Messiah. And in the Greek Orthodox, this carries in with a lot of the broadcast. It segues in with the things we talked about, Tartaria, and the role right now that's being played in the wars in those areas. It is just very, very, very significant.
Yeah, man, what an interesting place. There's no doubt. And you have so many different, I guess you would call it, idols here.
Full of idols,
And,
yep.
This is reminiscent of the church we visited, that underneath the Catholic church that had the tombs that and the dead saints that you could see right through the glass. So
Oh, yeah.
pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just going through some of these pictures that they have here. And the rotunda, and there's actually, when I was looking at the blueprints of this, there's 12 entrances to this temple. There's like 8 for the common entrance, and then there's several others that enter in other parts of this temple.
Yeah, I thought I was right, Darren, about John the Baptist's skull.
Anyways, that's enough of that, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And I will say for the record that I am far from convinced that that's the actual real site of the crucifixion. This came down from Constantine's wife, Helena, or maybe it was his mother.
His mother.
Just certain. But anyway, it is very, very compelling, and it shows us what they believe. And, we just can't rule out that idea that blood might have.
Yeah, Vars, they do that to Geronimo's skull as well. It seems to be a skull thing like these guys suggested, doesn't it?
Adam and the last skull. But anyway, whether it did or whether it not, that blood was shed, was the pure blood of our sinless virgin-born Savior that died for the salvation of our sins, to give us new birth for everyone that puts their faith in Christ and his death upon the cross as payment for our sin debt. There is salvation and new birth and victory over all the forces of hell.
That's true. And guys, if you enjoyed this broadcast, and we have so many others like it that continue, and we're going to continue until we're not able to continue anymore, hit that subscribe button. And I'm going to ask you on the count of 3 to pound that like button. Just pound the fire out of that thing. Let it know who is boss. Make sure it knows, because I'm telling you right now, sometimes it doesn't understand. And so on the count of 3, guys, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Boom. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We felt it over here. We feel the love. Thank you so much for supporting what we do. And
okay, that was pretty interesting.
Need to work smarter with your accountant? End of financial year is better off on zero.
That doesn't do this like what you think. We are all guilty of loving dates. I mean, whether it's date setting, whether it's date suggesting, or maybe it's just hopeful. I would love to know the date of the rapture,
yeah,
or the date of the arrival of the second coming. And so let's talk about the 2025 date. Okay, there's this date. It's not just manufactured out of thin air. Why, again, for the average person that doesn't do this like what you guys do, in the sense of study full time and everything, why should 2025 have any significance at all? Let's talk about that.
Well, basically, just really quickly, they have a calendar, and their concept is there are 7,000 years between the creation.
The scenes have a calendar. Okay.
Yeah, between the creation in Genesis and the creations of a new heaven and a new earth. So that encompasses 6,000 years of man's history and a millennial reign. They have that all mapped out. So theoretically, if that's correct, these last 1,000 years starts in the year 6,000, and they divide these into Jubilee periods, 50-year periods, which sometimes they call generations. And so with this, they mark the age of creation, the age of Torah, and the age of grace, and then a millennial reign. So not trying to set dates per se, but on their calendar, that last part should start in the year 6,000. So the last generation, or the last 50-year period from before the year 6,000 would start in 2026. So the year 2025 is the Jubilee, or the 50th year of a 50-year period. And so a lot of the scrolls talk about the fact that prophecy can happen at any time, but the bulk of prophecies occur at the change of the ages and the change of the Jubilee periods. So when we're looking at that, and we think about Jesus talking about the last generation, that kind of thing, we see that a lot of prophecies will probably happen in 2026 to 2075. Now, like I would have guessed, the war with Hamas would have started a couple years from now.
Yeah,
but it actually started, last year.
Yep. So in thinking about this, I know, my background's in the ancient Near East, and so you have the biblical chronology, the kings and everything else, and then they do a lot of regnal years, and fifth king, 50 year of such and such. Well, in thinking about that, you have the trying to connect with an absolute date, in the sense of especially connecting with Egypt. Egypt is very helpful when you look about the different dynasties of Egypt. So in that case, you have whether it's the Egyptian chronology or even the biblical chronology, here you have the Essene chronology. So you have these different calendars out there. I guess for us, we're sitting here living in the Gregorian chronology, right?
Right.
So, Josh, how do we get how do we anchor? How do you guys anchor the Essene calendar anywhere connected with the Gregorian calendar, which will?
Yeah, they said it was so secret they can't talk about it. I remember that interview as well.
Allow us to understand why we're in 2025. Well, shouldn't 2,000 years been there? So where does it anchor at?
Yeah, there are definitely differences, but Ken has actually developed a really wonderful free tool on a website called dsscalendar.org, where it superimposes the Essene calendar right onto our Gregorian calendar. So you could look at, and it does it for year to month to day. We also do have a print version that he and I worked on together. People are interested in that if they want to hang it on their wall, but it's a free resource, and you can use that to see, like, okay, so today's this date, what would that be on the Essene calendar? So that helps out a lot too. So then you don't have to do a bunch of math every single time you want to figure it out. And one thing that I wanted to mention too about the prophecies being in the last Jubilee, in the final Jubilee of the age of Torah. So their ages would be 2,000 years apiece, and then there's a final Sabbath age that's only 1,000 years. We would call that the millennial reign of Christ. Well, at the last 50 years of the age of Torah, that was between 25 AD and 75 AD, according to our understanding of the count, or 76 AD. But it's in that time period. Well, the rapture is only one prophecy. There's a lot of prophecies that we have that's going to happen before Jesus returns and sets things straight for the millennial reign. Well, when you think about that, 25 AD, Jesus came the first time probably around 29, 30 AD, somewhere around there.
Starting his ministry.
Yeah, starting his ministry. And then look at all of the prophecies that got fulfilled in a really short amount of time until he was killed in 32 AD in the indwelling of the Holy Spirit and all that. And then finally you get a few decades worth of things happen too until the destruction of the temple. But all of that really important stuff that sets the stage for the next age, they didn't have to wait till 75, 76 AD for that to occur. That happened pretty early in the final Jubilee of the age of Torah. So while we can't put a specific date, we could say that, yeah, according to the Essene calendar, 2076 should be the first day of the new age, if their calendar is correct and if it continues the way that we think it's going to. But that doesn't mean that we have to wait all that time, or even 7 years before that necessarily, for the rapture. There's a lot of different ways that this could pan out. We could have an early rapture, and you could have a gap between the rapture and the tribulation. That's one possibility. You could also have a gap between the end of the tribulation and when the next age starts. How long is it going to take for Jesus to judge everybody? You know, how long is it going to take to set the world up and to build the amazing temple and city that we read about at the end of Ezekiel, which of course we all believe that's all totally literal. It's not figurative. Well, that stuff takes time, and I don't think Jesus is just going to come down, snap his fingers, and everything's different. I think that stuff is going to have to be built. So we don't necessarily have to wait that long. We can't put a date on the rapture, of course. There's nothing in the Dead Sea Scrolls saying any kind of date or anything like that. It's really consistent with biblical theology. There's little hints of the rapture throughout it, but it doesn't give us a date. So we don't know. But so the dates that we have are more about a time frame rather than a specific date. So we're looking at a 50-year time frame where a lot of things could happen early on, just like it did at the end of the age of Torah. So I think that can kind of help hopefully relieve some people when they hear 2075. I got to wait that long. I'm not going to live that long.
Let's talk about that because I just like to throw things out. That's where my mind works. So we know on the Gregorian calendar that we are, if Jesus, most of New Testament scholars believe Jesus was crucified and resurrected on 32 or 33 AD. Okay, that's the kind of those 2 years. Some people will say 29, but that's not. The best date is that 32, 33 framework. Okay, so I don't think we've lost too much understanding in our calendar. What I mean by that is here, let's fast forward to 2032. Like, so here we got 8 years from now. Well, it's pretty solid then that there's 2,000 years going from the time of Jesus to this period of from 32 AD to 2032. And that is, well, that's an age. That's an age, right? I mean, according to the Essene not calendar, but according to the Essene chronology of 2,000 years being an age. So is it possible, and we also know that again, 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. So are things based, could it be off? Could have the new age began at the time of Jesus's resurrection, and then the temple gets destroyed 40 years later in the still new age of grace? Could there be? Is it off? Could it be by 40 years off? Because here's what I'm saying is that if let's say we come to 2075, and we'll still be here, Lord willing, maybe. Okay, that's 40 years from now. Well, it's longer than that. It's 50 years. No, maybe I won't be here. Okay, but let's say we're sitting here and we're old and decrepit by that time at 2075. But now we're looking, hey, it's been 2,040 years from the time of Jesus's resurrection. That seems a little bit weird, doesn't it? That you would have not 2,000. You'd have 2040. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So the way that I understand it, they would have a specific date as the beginning of the next age, even if it doesn't specifically line up with anything prophetic on that date. So their final Jubilee in the Age of Torah would have started 25 AD. And I don't know that there was anything specific that occurred there. Now we would say, well, the church age began in 32, 33 AD with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And yeah, it did. That's when like the church really started.
We're coming up to 2000 anniversary.
But the specific age and the way that they lined out their chronology would have been 25 to 75. So the way that I kind of explain it in the book is it seems like in these final 50-year periods, and you can even see this in every age. You see this in the first age too with the Tower of Babel and Call of Abraham and all that. But it seems like there's this period of time where prophecies start to happen to get ready for the next age, so that when that 75, 76 AD date hits, everything is set in place for the next age to begin, even if some of that started early. So it would be like if I was going to throw a birthday party next Friday, well, I have some things to prepare before then. So I got to get a cake. Maybe I do that tomorrow. I got to get the presents. I got to hire attractions, and I would spend the rest of this week like doing all that. So I'm doing things to get ready for the party, but that's not specifically the party, even though they're all going to play important roles when the party happens. So that at Friday at 3 o'clock, let's say, the party happens. I think it's kind of the same way. So the way that I look at it, these final Jubilee periods, it's almost as if these two ages are kind of like melding together, where you get the start of one while the other one's winding down. And so you get this kind of blending thing. So I don't think that we would say necessarily that, well, since 32 AD, that was the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, so that's the start of that age. I don't think the Essenes would have saw it like that. That would have been one prophetic thing that happened in that age.
At the tail end
at
of
the tail
that,
end
of
to
that.
prepare for the next age. Yeah, and then, but the official start would have been 75, 76 AD. But that's also why it's really difficult to put exact set dates on this. It's more of like time periods that we look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing that I would add to that is I think we can rock solid set dates for their calendar system.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the prophecies on it. So for instance, on their system, which ends at 75, they talked about the first coming of the Messiah when he would atone for our sin nature. And the event that would occur is one Shemitah after the end of the 9th Jubilee of that lineup. And so if you look at the end of the age being 75 minus a whole Jubilee period, which is 25, and then you go forward to Shemitah, which is a 7-year period, it brings us to 32. So they're saying it's scroll 11Q13,
Wow.
they're saying that the Messiah would take care of our sin nature 32, 33 AD is what we would put on our calendar. So that, lets it sink in really, really well, give or take a year. And so that means the end of their calendar year for the year 6000 would be 75 or 76, 2075, 2076. So I think that's pretty rock solid. As far as the other prophecies, like he's saying, I mean, you've got Jesus being born, 30 years later dying, the church age starting several years later, the destruction of the Jerusalem temple 2 years later, taking down of the Essene temple, and then the end of the age a couple years later, and then several years later, you got the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and when that finally ended, that pretty much ended everything, and then the Great Dispersion. So you've got a 150-year period there where all sorts of things happen as a group, kind of. And so we're seeing that today, actually. If you take the 150 years before the year 6000, you had the Balfour Declaration, you had the establishment of Israel in 1948, the taking back of the Temple Mount in 67, and all the other things that have happened, the new priesthood, the practice sacrifices that have started up. So all those things are going in process.
So the year 6000, what Gregorian year would that be?
2075.
Oh, okay. But yeah,
That would be the year 6000.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, and again, thinking out loud here, is so ultimately, if we're comparing what we've experienced in reality, in the sense of the Christian era, from a Christian perspective, we would recognize theologically that the age of grace began at Pentecost, right? And and we're coming up on that 2,000 years. Here again, we're 9 years short, or so, 8 to 9 years short. So does that make any difference in the sense of understanding that the age of grace truly, not in an obscene way, but in a practical way, truly began at the time after Jesus' death and resurrection?
I would think it could, and I think it depends on how you use the term. Like, for instance, I know in a lot of the church fathers, they talk about how the Antichrist persecutes us, the believers, the church. And everybody says, oh, well, that's got to be, post-trib rapture type stuff. And when you look at the way they use the church, they're talking about believers. They actually define it from Abraham forward. So when they say church, and that's not how we use church,
Right.
and I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but they mean believers, okay? And so when we
historically, even all the way back.
Right.
Okay.
So when we say the age of grace, you and I are talking about the church age. And I think they're talking about the age of grace on the calendar, which may be different. So the church age and their age of grace might be different than what we refer to as the church age.
So yeah, I mean, anything you want to add to that?
Oh no, that's exactly right. So you ask any Christian nowadays, like how long is the church age, and they'd say, well, it's been about 2,000 years, but we don't know how long it's going to last. It could be another 6,000 years. But if you were to ask an Essene the same question, when they hear age, they're thinking a 2,000-year period specifically. So they would just say 2,000 years. So yeah, it just depends on how we use the terms.
Yeah, because obviously, even in terms of the Torah as it relates to the 613 commands, I mean, that came with Moses.
Yeah.
In 1400 BC, 1445, 1444 BC. So that's certainly, many centuries after Abraham.
Right.
And so to have it be super tight like that,
Exactly.
it's hard to believe that the Torah began with Abraham.
No, it's still the age of Torah even before the Torah came to be, because the age of Torah would have started with the call of Abraham, but it was, again, setting up everything that needed to be for that age to operate and work. So there's a lot of different prophecies and different ways on how things can be, when things can.
What happened to the Speaker of the House? He was calling for Biden's impeachment. Ken Johnson, is that his name? This guy's name's Ken Johnson as well, but the Speaker of the House, he was calling for impeachment 6 weeks ago. Now he's gone all quiet.
Happen within certain ages, but it's like, what is that period mostly known for? That's the age of Torah.
As a matter of fact, according to some of the manuscripts, it talks about
he started off well, didn't he, Diane?
It's supposed to start with the guy that starts.
Then just sold out
the group of people. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kind of are the ones that started Israel, and the nation of Israel would bring Messiah. So that's the start of the age of Torah. And when you look at
it's Ron Johnson, is it?
The call of Abraham when he was 52. Not when he went down to Canaan, but when he was called, actually was the year 2000 on their calendar. So that hit exactly at the end of an age.
So, I mean, so here we're talking about, we're coming up on the year, 2025. We're got 6 months left to 24 or so, 7 months left. Then what's significant then in the sense of trying to explain the Essene calendar? What's happening? Let's go to March of 2025, spring equinox. Let's talk about what is significant about that.
It begins this next March begins the 50th year of this Jubilee period. And then the following year is the last generation or the last Jubilee before that. So we should start seeing a lot of prophecy fulfilled. And we have seen things that we've never seen before, like Iran actually attacking Israel. That's prophesied in several scrolls and in scriptures, but we've never seen that before. Now, this was short-lived, but it's not the only time this is going to happen because there's some great details in that. We've seen a lot of things happen with Israel, and we will begin to see a lot of wars, a lot of expansion, a lot of different things. Zephaniah, Obadiah talks about the time when they colonized the Negev, they take back Gaza, they control Lebanon up to Zarephath, which is the 6 miles north of the Litani River, which is where they're saying they're going to take and control that now as part of and whether that actually happens or whether it happens and some political figure later on gives the land back, which has happened multiple times. Either way, we see it in prophecy. So there's a lot of interesting things happening.
Anything, Josh?
I think he covered it.
So, I'm just I know what all of you are thinking out there, and I'm going to be your advocate right now, okay? Now, I don't want to believe.
Yep, that's it, Mike Johnson, not Ken Johnson, Mike Johnson. He's gone all quiet.
We have until 2075, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's just till the beginning of the millennium.
Right.
So we got a tribulation. We have all sorts of prophecies that need to be fulfilled in that time, and they could all come early because it's perfectly reasonable to have the end of the tribulation and still have some decades before the next age starts. And because there might be things that need to be done. Again, how long does it take for Jesus to judge everybody at that time? How long does it take to build the temple and for people to, beat their swords into plowshares and to get the word around the whole world? This is the way that things are now. How long does it take to build that temple in that city?
You're talking like the millennial temple.
Yeah, the millennial, that we read about in Ezekiel. Like, how long does all of that take? I don't think it's going to be the day that Jesus plants his feet on the ground. All of a sudden, this stuff is miraculously just there. It could be, and I don't know for sure, again, because there's a lot of different ways this could play out, but it could.
Okay, doesn't Jerusalem come down out of the sky, the new Jerusalem? So it's already built before it hits the earth.
Could be that takes time. And again, another option is you could have an early rapture and a later tribulation. And you could have, because the rapture isn't what starts the tribulation. It's, the covenant, the signing of the confirmation of the covenant with Benny is what starts the tribulation. So there's a theory out there that it's possible you could have the rapture happen and you could have years in between that and and the tribulation. So that's a possibility as well. I'm like you. I don't want to believe that we have to wait until I'll be 90 years old if I make it that long. So there are different ways, and it might be that, but there are ways to look at it where there's nothing preventing the rapture from happening immediately today before we even finish this interview. There's nothing preventing that. And then you can still have all of those prophecies happen within that period and still have the calendar make sense. Or maybe Jesus was just literally, I'm going to cut the days short and we're not going to wait till 2075. So there's God can do whatever he wants. But I think the consistent view would be to look at 2075, 2076 to be the time where everything is put in place, everything is finished, where we can start the first day of the millennial reign. Everything's done. Temples built.
No, I didn't.
Everybody knows
Not
the
me.
rules. They know the festivals.
Must have been Gabe.
Nations know that they got to come up for tabernacles, and just everything's done. And I would think just practically that's probably going to take some time to set up. I don't think it's going to be able to be done the last day of the tribulation. But again, there's different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The whole idea of the scripture says that those days will be cut short. Now, that might be 5 days, or it might be days like a couple of decades.
Could it be 5 decades? Could it be a whole jubilee cut short?
I would assume. I wouldn't think it'd be a whole jubilee. Of course, if that's the case, the rapture should have happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So no, I guess not.
Well, I'd like to check them tunnels out, though. I like checking things out like that.
Yeah, because you start thinking about, again, I love, we're not date setting here, but it's fun to speculate. Isn't it? I mean, no one's setting a date, but it's fun to think out loud about possibilities. And, we're all to be, and no matter what we decide today or not figure out or whatever, we're still going to get up tomorrow and do the Lord's work. Okay? No one's quitting their jobs. I find it, go ahead.
I think one point that we need to remember too is we're talking about calendar systems, which may or may not be 100% accurate. Mm-hmm. If we looked at the modern Jewish calendar and tried to pinpoint the year 6000, it's over 220 years away.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have it be 50 years instead of 220.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the Gregorian calendar, I think we missed it by 24 years. Yeah. So it's just like, it's a calendar system.
Well, and that's kind of what I look at too is, again, we are, when Pope Gregory, again, Gregorian, when he's looking at, the Julian calendar, the Roman calendar, and then he starts like, we need to make this a little bit better, at least Christianize it, right? Mm-hmm. Certainly that's what he did as a Catholic. Well, he looked back and he could see there were some discrepancies. I think he dropped like 13 days or 16 days off. He's like, well, this doesn't work. So we're going to evaporate those and we're going to squeeze it all together. Which again, that's the nature of looking at different calendar systems. Egyptians used to have a 10-day week. I mean, you have stuff like that. So I think what I look at is, that's what I was leading up to. Well, if the 32-33 date of Jesus's death and resurrection is relatively accurate, which I think most scholars would recognize that's true, then we're coming up on an age ending.
Yeah.
So even if it's not necessarily connected to the specifics of the Essene calendar, their idea of what an age would be as 2,000 years. And in my mind, I like the idea much better. I'm sorry, guys. No offense. No offense. I like the idea of thinking, which again, it's not a prophecy by any means, of thinking that the church had an opportunity to evangelize the world for a full age. Mm-hmm. And that would end roughly around 32 or 33 AD.
Yeah, Jesus might come back in that year to finish what he started and there's still time for the tribulation before that. I mean, and if that's the case, man, the rapture should be coming up pretty soon.
Because what I find fascinating is going back to some of the other stuff that you and I have talked before, Josh, about even Apophis and thinking in terms not so much of the 2029 date but of the 2036 date.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting too, that, again, I don't think we could prove that Apophis arrives at 3.5 years into the tribulation to that level of specificity. But if we were to go with that as a theory, I know we're talking to you and Derek and even Tom was, then you subtract 3.5 years roughly, that brings you to the fall of 2025.
Yeah, it does.
So you think, oh, wow. But if we were to look at it differently in the sense of a 33 date or 32 with that 2036, in the middle of 2036, and you take 3.5 off of that, it brings you
Still
back.
works.
It brings you back. If Apophis was to hit the Earth,
Mhm.
hypothetically in 2036, because even Neil deGrasse Tyson, I have a clip from him not too long ago where he describes that the 2029 arrival of Apophis. Said he specifically, there's this keyhole, this is the language that we use, and if it comes through and it's supposed to come in under 20,000, around 20,000 miles near the surface of the Earth in 2029. Well, the moon's at 240,000. So the way he was describing it was, if it comes through this keyhole, it's going to affect the trajectory, the orbital trajectory of the Apophis, so that when it comes back, this is his words.
Yeah.
Secular guy, he's not a Christian. He said, if it comes through this key, the 600-mile keyhole, in 2029 and just scrapes us, it will hit us in 2036.
Yeah.
I found that really amazing that he was willing to say that publicly, because he's got a lot at stake in his mindset. But again, that idea would then fit with the 2033.
The dates still work.
The dates work.
Yeah.
Which gives me some hope that I won't be. I was born in 1974. So
You're still young.
Well, at the end of it, I'll be 102, gentlemen.
I was born in 84, so.
Okay, so you'll be a little younger. You'll be a little younger than me.
You're both young. I was born in 60. When was you born? It's been so long. 65.
65.
Yeah, 1965.
Oh, wow.
So we got 20 years apart,
Yeah.
10 years apart. Yeah, so you'll be 110.
If I do the Essene diet and use the herbal medicine just right,
Yeah.
I might still be. Well, I think it's interesting, no matter how you look at it, all those dates and speculations, you notice it's all in the last Jubilee.
Yeah.
Which is in the last generation, according to the scrolls.
Yeah.
There's even another one, a 2068 date, and that's
Yes.
7 years from 2075.
It really is. Yeah, the 2068 Apophis date. So, I mean, needless to say, I think all of us, regardless of whether we look at the Essene calendar or we look at anything else, the average person, I mean, come on, guys, the average person that is just all of us, here we are, I mean, thinking about the world. I think about and when I mean the average person, I think about, not in an academic sense. I don't really mean it that way. I just mean like my brothers or my sisters, the average American out there that's sitting there just living life and not necessarily focused on prophecy. They're looking around and they're going, man, the world's changed.
Yeah.
Something has changed. And so when we see this, and we see Israel becoming a nation in 1948, them controlling the old city in 1967 in Jerusalem. We are not. This isn't. I don't see. Oh well, Jesus will come back in 1,000 years. No, the fact that God brought Israel back in 1948 was the big sign.
Yeah.
That we are approaching the end of the age, and now, of course, we've seen a prophecy begin to unfold. So, as we look, we don't even need the Essene calendar to tell us that, right?
Right.
We can just look around and say, yes, here we are. But then to have some of these other calendars come and they seem very consistent is pretty amazing.
Origin Home puts energy in your hands and cleaner energy solutions at your fingertips with solar and battery options to electric cars, smart charging, and more. Origin Home connects you to cleaner products today. Head to the Origin Home Hub.
Oh, that ended.
Watchers, and we're going to talk about the upcoming February 29th Orlando Prophecy Conference. With me is Bob Ulrich. Bob, you are a busy man.
I am. Where's Mondo? I'm used to having Mondo out here with us, and
You are.
it's like the old time.
It is like the old times. I know you're really excited about Orlando, not only because of those speakers, but also because of what's going on in the world today. It's crazy.
Gary, it is unprecedented. In fact, normally I would just be able to rattle off all the things off the top of my head. Not that I'm getting older, but there's just so many things going on right now. I just jotted down some notes here. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Iran, China, the April eclipse, the Houthis, Donald Trump's courtroom saga, the rise of artificial intelligence, the World Economic Forum, the digital currency rollout, the BRIC station, the two-state solution, and the coming presidential election. What a time to be alive.
It's an amazing time to be alive.
Well said.
You know, may you live in interesting times, which is called an ancient curse. Because who wants to live in interesting times? Everything bad is happening. And we can complain about what's going on today, except for one thing. We have the word of the Lord, we have the Holy Bible, we have prophecy. And Bob, it's encouraging when you read the Bible, no matter how afraid you might be of some of the things that could happen, it's still very encouraging to read prophecy.
You know, over the years, you've commented to me on several occasions that, Bob, why are you surprised? These are the things that the Bible tells us right before Jesus returns. Now, we have a guest at our upcoming prophecy conference in Orlando that we're going to be live streaming. His name is Matt Freeman. He pastors New City Church here in Oklahoma City. And I met Matt a couple of years ago. He is just retired from his engineering company. He's a full-time pastor now at a local church that teaches prophecy. And I asked Matt to come and speak at our Orlando event because we had a conversation about a passage in Hosea 6, 1 and 2. It actually goes back a little further. And I want to read this because to me, this is a time marker to the Lord's return. Now, we're not date setters, but we're also cognizant that the Bible tells us to watch. We're told that that day will not escape.
Pretty sure Sri Lanka's Hindu.
Us shouldn't come as a surprise. It won't be a surprise to us. I mean, we're anticipating the return of Christ literally any day now. But I love this passage. It starts in Hosea 5:14. And it says, "For I will be unto Ephraim as a lion, as a young lion to the house of Judah. I, even I, will tear and go away. I will take away, and none shall rescue him." Now remember that this is written to Israel. This is not written to the church. "I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, they will seek me early." And then this is where it gets interesting, more interesting. It says, "Come, let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. In the third day, he will raise us up and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know, if we follow on, to know the Lord is going forth as prepared as the morning. He shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain on the earth." Well, Gary, when I read that and I see 2 days and then the third day, how do you interpret that?
Bob, you have to go back to 1897, First Zionist Congress. Fast forward to May 14th, 1948. Fast forward to 1967 and the Six-Day War. Fast forward to where we are right now, another war. And what you have to conclude after reading Hosea, as Bob just did, is that we are living in that time zone. We can't set a date, but Israel's back, Bob. And Satan does not want Israel to be back in the land. I think that's evident right now because all of the dark side is after Israel.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the passage that says, "One day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day." So when we see this 2-day marker and then the third day,
yes,
can't help but think it's a 2,000 year, and we don't know the start date of when that 2,000 year begins, and then the 1,000-year millennium. So when do you think Jesus actually ascended to heaven after he rose from the dead?
Well, not very long. And then there was a very short interval, but I don't know that we have a number of days.
I thought it was 40 days.
Let's put it this way. We're in the final stages of world history. I mean, that calendar has been ticking for a couple thousand, close to a couple thousand years now from the ascension.
Well, Bob, what has really surprised me is the anti-Semitism globally. And in our colleges, and even in our high schools around the country, we've seen marches against Israel. And who's mobilizing these marches? Well, of course, Satan. Satan does not want to see Israel come back into the land because that.
I get in arguments with the atheists, the ones I argue with on Facebook, because they say I've got no right to judge. And then you're supposed to be a righteous judge. You're allowed to judge so long as you're righteous about it.
signifies his final demise. In other words, the events that transpire after Israel comes back to the land result in the destruction of Satan, and he's fighting like a man who is about to lose his life, which he is.
And you know, this whole concept of the two-state solution, as they call it, which is no solution at all, is being pushed by the Biden administration pretty heavily, with a heavy hand right now, by the leaders who are constantly pressuring Israel to accept the Palestinian state. And the resistance has been kind of fascinating, and they're just pushing. In fact, just recently, they basically said, well, we don't really need Israel to acknowledge a two-state solution. We'll just do it without Israel's agreement, which is just unbelievable. So here we sit on the final stages of history, and we're watching all these things happen. I'll be packing a truck today for Orlando. We'll be down in Orlando next Wednesday for the Orlando Prophecy Summit. We have 850 some odd people registered, and believe it or not, 250 people on a waiting list.
Wow, that's great, Bob.
Yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat.
We are indeed. You know, the fascinating thing about these conferences, I think I'm safe in saying that every conference we've ever held has revealed something to us. You come back from these conferences all fired up and full of new ideas, and it's as good for us as it is for the people that come.
I thought you were going to say you come back from these conferences exhausted. It's a lot of,
well, you do, because you do the work.
It's a lot of hard work, but you know, we're going to have the solution to having a sold out conference is live streaming. And ever since we went on Daystar 2.5 years ago, Daystar has brought us into the homes of people all around the world. Just an incredible blessing for an event like this, where people in all these foreign countries, you know, literally, I could name them all, rattle off all the names of the countries, but they're able now to tune into these events. The conference starts on February 29th. It goes for 4 days through the 3rd of March. We've got 18 speakers listed. That would include 19 with Gary. 37 messages are going to be launched through the live streaming feed. You're going to be able to watch at your convenience. You can watch live with the rest of the crowd in Orlando. You can watch at night when you get home from work. You can watch on Saturday morning. You'll actually have 6 entire months to watch all 37 messages, which is exciting to me because we're reaching people and planting seeds literally all around the world now that we never had the opportunity to do before.
Now, Bob, I wish I could be there, but once again, I'm not able to make it for a couple of reasons, but I'm working on a presentation.
And it's going to be included in the live streaming. Eventually. And I just have to pull my Bible over here and read something that I found in the Bible that just jumped out at me a couple months ago. And in Zephaniah chapter 2, and I have to stop with a parenthesis and ask you, Bob, whoever reads Zephaniah? Those people don't even know where it is or the sign.
A very, very small prophecy, and yet my eyes fell upon Zephaniah 2:4. And it said, for Gaza shall be forsaken. Well, that caught my attention right away. And Ashkelon, a desolation. Wow. And they shall drive out Ashdod at noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. I'm reading this, and I'm also watching television, and I'm seeing this. Oh, this can't be. You're reading something into the Bible. You shouldn't do that, right? And then the next sentence, woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, the nations of the Cherethites, it says in the King James Bible. So you do a little work on that word, Cherethites. Who are those people, the Cherethites? It's a capital CH, Cherethite. And long story short,
some sort of cherub.
The Cherethites are people who are charging, that is to say, as in a battle, carrying a knife or something, and running as fast as they can. And they are going to chop somebody's head off when they find their first enemy. So Cherethites comes from the Keretim, running assassins. Is a pretty good.
Good night, Shawnee. God bless.
make that word come into our modern English. And remember October 7th?
How could anyone forget?
Running assassins. And I thought, okay, we need.
I see something interesting over there. You actually wrote an article.
Yeah, I wrote an article for the magazine called Gaza's Running Assassins. Bottom line, and we could talk about Zephaniah for a long time. Bottom line, though, is that we're seeing the fulfillment of prophecy right now.
100%.
Yes, we are. And we're going to be discussing that over 4 days here. Literally just less than a week away now, which is hard to believe it's come so fast. We've got the leaders in the world of Bible prophecy with us. Names you're all familiar with: L.A. Marzulli, Billy Crone, Bill Salas, Bill Koenig. I could go down the list of all of these people. You can find the names of everyone at prophecywatchers.com. 37 messages coming via live streaming. And, this has opened up an opportunity for all these speakers to share what the Lord has put on their heart too.
Right.
Just looking at a couple of the message titles on here, I really almost didn't know, which ones to even list because one after another is so great. Mondo, of course, is going to be with us talking about the 10 Kings of Revelation, something he wrote about here about a year and a half ago. It was really an eye-opening article for people to realize that those 10 kings are described as kings without a kingdom.
Yes.
How do you be a king without a kingdom?
And by the way, Mondo is going to speak on that subject, and we'll answer that question.
Okay. Billy Crone has a new series on UFOs. Every day there's another hint, disclosure, coming to the world. All the whistleblowers, all the military pilots, people coming out talking about what actually they've been seeing for years that's been covered up. Tom Hughes, great title, The Gospel of Judas and the Tower of Babel. I can't imagine where he's going with that.
Yeah.
As one of the rising stars in the world of Bible prophecy, he's really, he's left the pastorate now. He's a full-time prophecy guy, and I know he's really enjoying that opportunity. Gary, Alex Snowman is going to be with us for the first time. He's an investigative journalist, and he's going to be speaking about the coming digital currency, the central bank currency, the Fed dollar. And to me, this is one of the biggest hot buttons in the world of prophecy right now, and where we go with all that.
Well, when you control the money, you control everything.
There you go.
By the way, Bob, I just have to mention, you passed up J.B. Hickson. And
Just saving him for last.
Oh, you were? Okay, well, then we'll save him for last.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a remark about it. I've gotten to know JB a little bit lately, and Bob, the man, is possessed of an incredible store of knowledge. And his commentary on Bible prophecy is something you just have to hear. He is an amazing thinker.
He may have come up with one of the greatest titles ever, The Conspiracy Theory Conspiracy, and subtitled Satan's Secret Societies and the CIA. So I'm eager to hear what JB has to say. He's got another message, New World Order Timetable 2025, the blueprint for global tyranny. So he is on the cutting edge of a lot of things happening in the world that you're probably not going to hear about in church, which is what our conferences are all about. These are not normal events. You're going to hear things that, as they say, not safe for work, things you literally will probably not hear from the pulpit on a Sunday morning. Bill Salas, of course, is going to be talking about Jerusalem, talking about.
Good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
Talking about Jeremiah 49 and 50, talking about Isaiah 17, all these ancient prophecies in the Bible that we can see all the pieces coming into place now.
Bob, it's fascinating to see how all these speakers are coming together with messages that I have to knit into one big message. Of course, L.A. Marzulli is going to be with us, and where L.A. goes, there's excitement. And he's found something lately, Bob, that he can't stop talking about.
He likes to call it boots on the ground. Yeah, he actually went to Roswell and went to the site of the crash of the supposed weather balloon in 1947. And he, with the help of some ground penetrating radar equipment, he's discovered some strange metal, embedded in the ground. And there's the bigger story behind it than that, but he's excited to share his message. Andy Woods, take a look at Andy's message, Revelation 3:10. Why does that message matter?
Why does that message matter? Well, where is Revelation 3? It's right in the middle of the unveiling of the shift from our dispensation to the next dispensation, and everybody will want to hear his message. By the way, he and I once walked out on stage, and he's about 1.5 feet taller than I am, I think, and we got a big laugh. But the people quit laughing when he started talking. Let me tell you, he is serious.
Well, we're going to get a picture down there of Andy in between you and Mondo, and that'll be one for the ages for sure. He's a big guy.
He is.
But it's a verse to me that is really something I quote quite often. It basically says that we can escape this time of trouble that's going to come upon the whole world. And it's right before a door opens in heaven, and the Apostle John is caught up to see the future in the book of Revelation. So to me, it's one of the greatest proofs of the pre-trib rapture. And we're not going to be here. The verse says we can escape that time. Well, how can you escape? Now, some people want to say, well, God is going to protect you, divine protection. Then you read Revelation 13:7, which says the exact opposite. So one after another, all these speakers are delivering these powerful messages on the end times.
By the way, Bill Keeney's got to be with us. And Bill is situated in Washington, D.C. and environs, and he has his ear to the ground. He's always very much aware of what's happening politically, internationally. He always has some inside material based upon Bible prophecy, but also very, very, very much in contact with the latest news. So you got to hear him speak.
Bill has a lot of on-the-ground connections in Israel.
He does.
Across the Middle East. This message that he prepares changes every year because the situation in Israel changes every year. And I know he's having a hard time keeping up right now. Now, a lot of people are wondering about what's going to happen to America. Brandon Holthouse, who's a dynamic preacher, is going to be with us. One of his messages says, will the West survive? A lot of people are wondering, how does America meet our demise? Is America in Bible prophecy? Brandon's first message is the trap has been set for Israel. So he's following current events, seeing Israel and America, the big Satan and the little Satan, as the Islamic group calls us, and Israel. And so I'm eager to hear what Brandon has to say about what's about to happen. And what is about to happen.
Well, Bob, whatever it is, and I know that it's going to be dramatic, because we're living in dramatic times right now. And I just thank the Lord that you and I have been placed in the position we are in at this time in human history. It's a dramatic time to be alive, and it's a time when you can open the Bible and look at prophecy and actually see developments. Now, you can't set dates. A lot of people.
Wow, Diane, he's brought disgrace on America, hasn't he? He can't. It's beyond comprehension what he's doing.
Try. I have to confess that some years ago I tried a couple of times to set a date. I gave it up, but we're close.
Do you expect us to believe that you gave it up? I know you're still searching. Of course, we're all eager to see Jesus. There's no doubt about it. Join us February 29th.
Thanks, Darren. If I just stop smoking, I won't cough that. It's really the smoking that does it.
4 days of blessing, 37 messages, all of them on cutting edge subjects. These are not going to be boring messages you're going to have to take a nap through. These are things happening in our world today. How do you register for the live streaming? Head over to prophecywatchers.com. Scroll down to you see the live stream banner. Click on the banner. It'll take you to a registration page. If you've live streamed with us in the past through our partner Uscreen, you won't have to register again. But if you're live streaming for the first time, first thing you need to do is register, get your name and your email address and everything in proper order. So it's a pretty simple process once you get registered. A lot of people don't realize they need to register first. If you run into problems, call us here at the ministry. We have a customer service number. People here actually answer the phones up until 5 o'clock Central Time. So it's a pretty easy process.
And may I add, your prayers for us during this period would be very much appreciated. Pray for safety as we're on the road, and Bob's going to be on the road, and our man behind the cameras, Tyler, is always busy, and he's going to be driving. And so pray for prophecy watchers, for safety, for efficiency, for energy to do all the things that have to be done. And we would appreciate that, Bob.
And pray for the people in attendance. You know, we always assume that everyone who comes to these prophecy conferences knows Jesus. And I always love the expression L.A. Marzulli uses. He says, if you think you know him, you don't know him. And it's a scary thing to realize that you're not preaching to the choir. There are people coming to this event who are guests and other people hearing about Bible prophecy for the first time. They saw a program on TV. They decided to register, and they don't really know where they are in their relationship with the Lord. I just want to add one more thing. As we do every year, we've actually added 4 DVD bonuses.
Okay, guys, I'll finish off with Prophecy Club as usual.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club important program today. The title is The Petro Yuan Eats the Petrodollar. We've been talking about this. We've known this is coming since 2010 when Shane Warren told us about it, when he had a vision. Well, here it is. Now, the reason we ask you to subscribe $9.90 a month or more is because we're trying to take up the dips in our paying our bills. It seems like when I ask for help, I get it, but if I don't ask for help, I don't get it. So what we'd like you to do is join Prophecy Club, $9.90 a month or more on an automatic giving basis. That way, I mean, I'd love to be able to come on here, never have to say anything about, hey, we're in a jam. So this is the reason. And unfortunately, yes, we're in another jam. And this will hopefully take out some of the bottoms. All right, let's go on. Now, this is important to remember. We're looking for the first headline, Omar ushers in Palestinian state. We do not know that it happens this year. And sometimes I think, it's probably not going to happen. Not this year. And then right now, it looks more likely. But we're going to talk about it today. Now, the counting of the Omar is the 49 days between first fruits and Pentecost. Now, there's some question, Pentecost. Question whether the Pentecost is on the 13th or the 16th. So let's watch it for some time in that area. And we're looking for the headline, Omar ushers in Palestinian state. We don't know for certain if it comes in 2024. Neither do we know that it comes at Jerusalem Post, but we're watching. All right. This is the reason. Israel will give the Palestinians a state. We just don't know if it is this year. Now, this is the real important point today. Chris Reed was given 10 newspaper headlines. The first one is U.S. dollar drops 30% in value. The subtitle is look carefully. This is what we're talking about. Middle Eastern oil strikes deal with China instead of the U.S. We may and probably will see this headline before the end of June, possibly even next week. Why do I say that?
Wow.
Well, on Sunday, 6/9 of 2024, it has been confirmed.
Wow.
The 7-year treaty between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia expires. The one that says Saudis will no longer be required to sell their oil for U.S. dollars. What does that mean? It means that the U.S. dollars will no longer be the reserve currency of the world. It means that many of the nations no longer need to have piles and piles of dollars on hand to buy their oil. What does that mean? Well, Saudi Arabia is not renewing the 50-year-old petro agreement with the U.S. It expires June 9, that's Sunday. And I'm making this Thursday, so this is probably going to be the Monday program. So maybe by the time you watch this, it's already happened. The petrodollar was established in 1974. 3 years after the U.S. abandoned the gold standard under the petrodollar agreement, Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil exclusively in U.S. dollars in exchange for U.S. military security and economic development assistance, which they have now switched to Russia, and now they're switching to the Chinese yuan. Well, with this coming up, I know it's very important that you have food. So I called Jesse Kitchen a couple of days ago. Took them a couple of days to figure out exactly what they could do. And I said, look, is there any way we can make some kind of a special big summer blowout to get people food? And it took them a couple of days to calculate it up, but here's what they come up with. So most of the places when you order wheat berries, they come in a paper bag, and they only last for about a year. And bugs eat it, or mice eats it, or something. But Jesse Kitchen, as far as I know, is about the only one out there that does this. They send it out in big plastic, like 6-gallon pails, about 50 pounds per pail, and it is nitrogen packed. Now, what does that mean? It means that they run a copper line down to the bottom, about 1,000 pounds pressure, and they blow out the oxygen and replace it with nitrogen. What does that do? Well, hopefully the plan is it's going to kill any bugs in there. And the plan is it'll have at least long storage, perhaps even 25 years, who knows. So here's what I've asked them to do. I said, you got to have a really good deal. So they put together a deal: buy one pail and get a second pail free on red wheat till, while supplies last. Let me say it again. Buy one pail, get a second pail free. Now, one pail, according to my calculations, feeds one person for, as I recall, I think it was about a year. It might be 6 months. It's been a while since I've done this, but I think it's like a year. One person, 1 year. That doesn't sound right. So maybe 6 months. I don't know, but it's a long time. While supplies last, red wheat, go to josephskitchen.com. There's an S in there. josephskitchen.com. One pail, get a second pail free right now. And you're about to need it, sad to say. So, petrodollar replaced by the petro yuan. You recall, July 10, 2012, Shane Warren came and spoke to Prophecy Club about a vision he had back in 2010. And he said he saw a financial storm coming to America, and right here, the thing that caused it is when they start buying or selling oil in another currency. That happens Sunday, June the 9th. And he said he saw silver, not gold, but silver, drastically increasing in value. And for that, we'll send you to 800-200 gold, 800-200 gold, or prophecyclubgold.com. Now, here's further proof. Petrodollar dusk. In other words, it's the end of petrodollar. Petro yuan dawn. What investors need to know. This is from Forbes. Okay, so there's no question. This is happening. During a 3-day state visit, Chinese President Xi Jinping held friendly talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a show of unity as both countries increasingly seek to position themselves as leaders of what they call a new multipolar world order. What does that mean? Multipolar is another way of saying world government. Multipolar, in other words, the top half of the universe or the planet, and the bottom half. That's what they're saying. World government. One that challenges U.S.-centric alliances and agreements. What's that saying? Oh, yeah. It's saying we're going to replace the U.S. as the leader of the world, and that's because we have turned away from our God and we started sinning. In case you're wondering, petrodollars are not a real currency. They're simply dollars that be placed into trade oil. Early in the 1970s, the U.S. government provided economic aid to Saudi Arabia, its chief oil-producing rival, in exchange for assurances that Riyadh would price its crude oil exports exclusively in the U.S. dollar. We've talked about this. In 1975, other members of the OPEC also agreed. This had the immediate effect of strengthening the U.S. dollar, since countries around the world now had to buy dollars, keep them on hand in order to buy oil. But that stops Sunday, June the 9th. Are you listening? Now, Stan, what do you think is going to happen?
I'm listening,
I'm
Stan.
not giving financial advice. I'm not an expert in all these finances. I'm a prophecy guy. So based upon the prophecies, here's my guess. I think that there's a very, very good possibility that this next week, we could see the dollar devalued by 30%, just like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of the prophecies say it's going to happen. We could see it where you roll up to, just like Jason Week said, roll up to get money out of the ATM, and all of a sudden it switches. It may be this week, or maybe by the end of June, or maybe in a few months, hopefully more like a couple of years, but it's probably a month or so. All of a sudden we'll go to our bank and they'll say we had $1,000 in it. Now you have $700. They just devalue the currency overnight, automatically, with a click of a mouse. Now that's a guess, but that fits with the prophecies. So what do you do about it? Again, I can't give financial advice, but I can tell you if my mom were to call, I would say, Mom, do you have piles of money in paper? Paper being like money markets or IRAs or 401ks or in the bank. Okay, that's all paper. Okay, if you have money in paper, I suggest you call 1-800-200-GOLD. These guys specialize in helping you to get your paper into precious metals. Mm-hmm. Now we know that right here it says, I saw silver, but not gold, skyrocket. So you can figure out what you want to do there. Now, the problem is gold, a handful of gold will probably buy your freedom to another country. A handful of silver might buy you food for a week. Okay, so it takes a lot more weight in silver. Let's keep going though. Gone to the Petro Yuan. Putin couldn't have been more explicit. During Xi Jinping's visit, he named the Chinese yuan as his favored currency to conduct trade in. What happened? The dollar just died. Ever since Western sanctions were levied on the Eastern European country by Biden for its invasion of Ukraine early last year, Russia is increasingly dependent on its southern neighbor to buy the oil other countries won't touch. In just the first 2 months of 2023, China's imports from Russia totaled $9.3 billion, exceeding the full year 2022 imports in dollar terms. Okay, did you catch that? Wow. In other words, China and Russia really are going through the roof in terms of profits. Yes. And what is America doing? Well, we're having trouble paying our bills. We're having trouble buying bread. I mean, when I was a kid, my mom sent me to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread. And I remember the price. It was 37 cents. Today, $16, one place. Now let's talk about war. War is part of the prophecy. NATO says a cyber attack now is grounds for Article 5 collective self-defense. A false flag of their own countries blame it on Russia, then join the Ukraine war against Russia. Now, what's it saying? It's saying that NATO considers a cyber attack that they can't prove came from Russia, but they're saying it came from Russia, and they're now saying that NATO has been attacked. Now, what's Article 5? Well, Article 5 is the agreement made up right after World War II that says if any of the other NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, if any of those nations in that pact are attacked, all of the other nations come to the aid of that nation. Of course, now they've added several more nations. As you recall, Trump told them, look, if you're not paying up your whatever it was supposed to be 10% of your GPA, whatever anyway, then we're not going to protect you. So Trump caused NATO to get stronger just here in the last few years. Anyway, the head of NATO's military committee, Admiral, goes on to say NATO can now declare war over a cyber attack. So what does that say? Well, NATO is saying, Russia, you attacked us. And Russia is saying, NATO, you attacked us. So we have two guys that are the bullies, and they're saying, we're going to meet out behind the school after school tonight, and we're going to fight. As soon as school's out, I'm going to meet you in the back of the school. So we have two of the big bullies about to go to fight. We've agreed in NATO that a cyber attack can, in principle, be a reason to invoke Article 5. You know, in my lifetime, I've never heard such talk. This is war talk. This is what starts wars. 800, 200 gold. Better look. You need to have some bread. You need to have some gold. I use silver too. As a matter of fact, I think in my case, I have more silver than I have gold. So now, not only a real attack, but also a cyber attack can be the reason for a NATO member to declare Article 5 collective self-defense. The main thing is to identify the organizer of the attack. If the organizer is unknown, you don't have enough data to declare a war on anyone unless you manufacture it yourself. In other words, we know that NATO, the Brits, America has attacked Russia. NATO and American war machine parts, missiles and bullets and everything, have killed Russians on Russian territory. And you may be saying, yeah, well, you know, we sent money and we sent bullets over there to them. Yeah, well, it was sophisticated material that the Ukrainians aren't smart enough to aim or to pull the trigger. So we gave them the satellite aiming coordinates. We showed them how to pull the trigger on American equipment. So are we not to blame? Are we not at war? Yes, we are. Now, why is that important? Because Dmitry was told the fall of America will start with an internal revolution. Started by the communists. Some of the people will start fighting against the government. The government would be busy with internal problems. Then from the oceans, Russia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, and two other countries will attack and defeat America in 1 hour. Now, let me talk about that. You remember the other prophecy that Chris Reed was shown that it will start in April and it will be like some cataclysmic event before the end of 2024, and it's going to throw America into a tailspin, and she's not going to get out of it until July of 2025. My guess is we are probably, I said guess, we are probably talking about an internal revolution starting probably the third or fourth quarter. Of course, I guess we just entered into the third quarter here. The third quarter, in other words, right now, people that love Trump really, really love him, and they're about to go to war over it. And then people that don't like Trump really, really, really don't like him. And so consequently, there's a...
And I don't think he's overselling this. I think this is going to be a real problem because Biden's mob's not going to accept the election if Trump wins and vice versa. I don't think he's overselling this. I think it's a big problem.
Biden in a nation like I've never seen. There are people on both sides ready to pick up arms.
Yeah.
Both sides are angry at the other side like I've never seen. We could very well see an internal revolution in America this year. If anything happens to the election, if it doesn't take place, if there's cheating, if there is, let's say the Dems, let's say Trump wins, at least we think he wins, and then the Dems say, but we're not going to certify the election. Like Marco Rubio said, he found 12 or 13 Dems that said, even if Trump wins, we're still not going to certify the election. Something like that. See, there's an anger. We could see all of a sudden the good guys stand up and say, we've had enough. Trump is going to be in at the cost of blood. And all of a sudden there's blood. An internal revolution. Now, I remember when I first heard that back in February of 1988, I thought, I didn't see how that was going to. I don't know how many times I've said that to God. I don't see how there's going to be an internal revolution in America. But today I see. And I think you also see. It's also interesting that the angel came to Dmitry and said, you have 4 more years to carry Bibles. They will follow you step by step, but I'm going to be ahead and I'm going to blind the eyes of those people so they can't catch you. When they see they can't catch you, they're going to kick you out of your country. You're going to America to give them a warning from God. So that you know that truly the angel of God, I'm going to tell you the year, month, day, and hour you will be exiled to America. July 22nd, 1984, 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, for 4 years I carried Bibles. I would pull up to the checkpoint. Demetri, what do you have in the car? What do you do with all these books? Where are the Bibles? We know you have Bibles. They were tossing the Bibles around, but they couldn't see them. He said, finally the day came. We'd given away all of our earthly possessions, sitting in the front living room, all packed. The knock came to the door. Demetri, you have to come. What are you doing with these suitcases? Well, we knew you were coming. Demetri, you have to come with us. They took him to the airport. Just as the plane was backing up, July 22nd, 1984, 10 o'clock in the morning. He arrived in America August the 3rd, 1984. The angel came to him, took and showed him California, Las Vegas, New York, and Florida. He said, all this is Sodom and Gomorrah. In one day, it will burn. He said, how will it burn? America's so powerful. He said, it will start with an internal revolution in America started by the communists. Some of the people will start fighting against the government and all the rest of that, you know. Now, why was the angel so specific that he had to go to America and arrive specifically August 3rd, 1984? If you move that date forward 40 years, that's August 3rd of 2024. Could it be that the internal revolution is going to start on about or around August? Could it be that 40 years later is the start of the internal revolution? Well, it could be. And that fits
Okay, Darren, God bless, mate.
I'm not saying the internal revolution starts in 2024.
Diane, pride comes before the
That
fall.
we'll see Home Rushers in Palestinian state this year. I'm not saying it's going to appear in the Jerusalem Post. But as watchmen, that's what we do. We watch. So we're watching. Would it fit the prophecies if all of that happened? Yep, it would. Now, the question then becomes, let's say the internal revolution does start this year. How long from internal revolution to a surprise nuclear attack that destroys America in 1 hour? Well, the correct answer is, I don't know. My guess is, I want to think it's not just a few months. I want to think it's more like several years. And I'll tell you why I say that.
Okay, guys, I'm out. God bless.
Certain that the tribulation started October the 5th, which is